the Satanism story is real, the depth and breadth of it is unclear. They don't corrupt powerful people. They corrupt people and then give them power. The Epstein story is just so mind-bogglingly large, and it's different than we thought, right? If I were to list a series of possibilities, one is that they're MK Ultra products. I have the markets at 200% over historical average valuation. These markets are broken. The markets are acting like a teenager driving on black ice. I am one of the most hodler-friendly no-coiners. Totally sympathetic to everything you guys stand for. In no way does this year being a bad year mean you're in any way wrong.
Meet Dave Collum, Cornell chemistry professor turned financial firebrand, infamous for his unfiltered takes on market mechanics and elite conspiracies. Now, fair warning, we go diving down the deepest, darkest rabbit holes. In this episode, Dave warns of a looming financial catastrophe.
We're talking 70% correction.
He exposes that Epstein was not a blackmailer, but a twisted power broker.
Epstein was more about providing social lubricant, a truly legendary networker.
And Dave reveals the most extreme corruption and evil at the highest levels.
Is it unless you're a satanic cannibal, you will not get to a position of power?
Nothing was off limits. We also talked Bitcoin, Israel, and MK Ultra.
Kamala Harris has all the traits. I think Erica Kirk, easily.
All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Collum. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a ton of things that I want to jump into, but the first thing that's kind of top of mind that I wanted to get kind of your sense or your read on the situation is that we're kind of seemingly living in a bit of a post-truth era. So what struck me is like just in Canada, we just had the worst school shooting since the 1989 Polytechnic event.
Tranny, right? Another tranny.
And it was. That's exactly my problem, because the first thing that jumped out to me was how everybody was dancing around that issue, the media and the police. The police referred to them as a female in a brown dress. When a journalist used the pronoun he, they corrected them. And they even went so far as to say gun person instead of gunmen, because heaven forbid we actually, offend this monster who's now deceased. The thing that jumped out at me was like, you combine that with what we're seeing in AI in terms of content generation. Now, it still kind of hits like the uncanny valley sometimes, but it's getting harder and harder to discern. And so what I'm having a hard time not wondering is basically, how does society not like completely fall apart when not only is truth harder and harder to like, it's more elusive, it's harder to actually find, as well as most people don't actually care about getting to the truth. I'm reminded of like the Vegas shooting, COVID. Everyone just seems more concerned with, social approval or just apathy.
I think the apathy, I think that's part of the plan. The Epstein files, by the way, are, why are they all of a sudden releasing all this information, which is all fragmentary? It's got sort of 80% wow, 20% what does that really mean, sort of every one of them. You can't point to any one email that has the entire smoking gun in the image. You can see statements about how, thanks for the 9-year-old girl, but then the person who sent the thank you note is redacted, and I go, we want to know that guy's name, right? And you get this feeling that they decided to just release 3 million piles of goo such that we would be overwhelmed by it. So they flooded the zone with information. And, Thomas Massey and his buddies briefly went in for a couple hours and looked supposedly at the unredacted ones. And they came out with nothing, in my opinion. They came out with 6 names. So what? We had 100 names. We had hundreds of names. And they were not attached to an email of any consequence, right? And so I don't trust Thomas Massey's motives. I like Thomas Massey, but I'm not convinced he's really trying to get the information out because, for example, I'd search the 9-year-old and unredact that one, right? And that's the guy I'd do. And there was 4 of them in there for a couple hours. They could have taken some of the juiciest emails and really laid some people out. I think all the shootings, you mentioned the shootings, I think all the shootings, plus or minus maybe a couple, they're all way darker than just crazy drug-addled males. So they are, if I were to list a series of possibilities, one is that they're MK Ultra products, and if they are basically trained assassins through torturous methods when they were children, that sort of thing. And that's the most logical. At one point when I wrote about the I think I was writing it. It was either Uvalde or it was Las Vegas. Someone's hard drive was missing, and CBS News wrote an article and said, "Well, his hard drive was missing." And what I said was, "Don't you hate it when you lose your hard drive, right?" And
Yeah.
but then what happens is they said, but they listed about 5 other shooters. They said their hard drives were missing too, so it's not that big a deal. And I'm going, no,
Opposite.
yeah, you got that one backwards, right? And so, so Uvalde and Vegas and Florida nightclub, and you see crisis actors, which I think are real, and stuff like that. What's clear is that none of us were dedicated enough as conspiracy theorists. that
Yep.
Alex Jones, we'll give Alex Jones the dedication award, but the Epstein story is just so mind-bogglingly large, and it's different than we thought, right? You're not seeing evidence that Epstein was blackmailing people. What you're seeing is that he was doing huge negotiations with hugely important people. So I think Mike Benz had it right. About 6 months ago, he said Epstein was more about providing social lubricant, these young damsels. You find out what the guy likes, and you say, "Okay, come to my island. We'll talk turkey about you sending arms to whatever small country you want to send them to, and meanwhile you get the bang 9-year-olds." I mean, I think it's something a little closer to that. Ben's recently was it Ben's? Someone recently said, "Look, if you start blackmailing people, they're not going to like you, right?" And the other people who are potentially willing to be with you are going to say, "No, no, no, he's blackmailing people. This is not what I want to be involved in," right? So I think it would ruin his shtick. Yeah, I think it would ruin his game. So I think he's a truly legendary networker. So for the
Was
state
there
of Israel.
anything? There's 2 things I want to kind of pull apart there. One, I kind of agree with you. One of my first instincts regarding the Epstein files was it felt like a demoralization campaign. Like it was so much information to just waste your time on, and nothing there that would actually probably get a conviction or make any sort of real difference. It felt like a distraction, kind of like bread and circuses. Go and play with this. You'll feel a little bit better. You'll feel like you were right, but you'll have nothing actionable to do with it. And I'm curious if there is.
They gave us laser pointers.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so was there, because I know that you've gone deep down kind of like the missing children dark rabbit hole a few times before in the past, and I think you were already well aware of this sort of stuff. Was there anything that came out from these documents so far that was a bit of a revelation for you, or any sort of new information beyond that? It looks like he was really just a negotiator, almost like a power broker.
Well, there's new details, but nothing. So it's a little shocking to listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a congresswoman still, talking about the fact that it appears as though satanic cannibals are real. And I go, if you had told me 10 years ago there are satanic cannibals in the government, I would have said you really need a therapist quickly. Even I would have. And I entertain ideas that are way outside the box, as long as they don't defy the laws of physics. And I'm beginning to wonder about those. And so it appears that the Satanism story is real. The depth and breadth of it is unclear still. So is it, 200, 300 people? Is it 100,000? Is it unless you're a satanic cannibal, you will not get to a position of power? I do believe that they don't corrupt powerful people. They corrupt people and then give them power. I think that's the sequence of events. For 3 years, I've been studying it intensely, and for 3 years, I've been promising to write about it. For 3 years, I have failed to finish the task. And part of it is that it's getting more dangerous. And you say, well, okay, so Liz Crockett is out there screaming at the top of her lungs, and Mike Smith and a woman named Emma interviewing victims and things like that. And so why are you nervous? And one of the things that makes me a little nervous is, again, nothing against them, but I might be reading the room wrong. So it might be one of these things, wait a minute, no, Liz can scream about it, but we can't have this guy Cornell screaming about it.
Yeah, it's the proof of authority, right? If they can be dismissed easily, then they probably are okay with it. Almost undermines the story.
Right. And so Yeah, so it's desensitizing is what it is, but they don't need a fresh face coming in. They say, no, we got to deal with this guy, and they don't need to deal with you as. Did you see that Harrison montage? I don't know why I keep going here because it's very risky, but this Harrison montage, which he showed probably 10 minutes of sort of fairly rabid Zionists talking about what they should be doing. Did you happen to catch that on Twitter?
No, I didn't see that one. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, it's, his name is Harrison, and he put together this 10-minute montage, and it's very prominent Jewish leaders who are saying things like, "We have to round up people who don't support Israel and throw them in jail," and things like that. Just really, truly extraordinary things.
Yep.
And I'd seen a bunch of them because, like, one of them was the guy head of the JDL said that we've got 50,000 lawyers sort of in the queue waiting to sue people for libel, and I'm going, so they don't need to shoot me. They don't need to do a Charlie Kirk on me. They just need to send a lawyer. And you're now in the situation where they're trying to say, look, to oppose Israel is hate speech and it should be dealt with, and no, no, you're wrong. And the question is, I think they're playing a strategy that's kind of big win or lose strategy, and I don't know if it's going to work or not. But the strategy, I believe it started on October 7th.
Okay,
I think that was the kickoff right there. That was the Super Bowl kickoff.
Do you have suspicions about that, by the way?
Have I what?
Do you have suspicions about that? How the response time
It's
was
not just
quite slow?
suspicions.
Yeah.
They held the door open. I mean,
Okay,
there's no way Hamas went in there. First of all, they wouldn't have gotten in. Second of all, I can document using Israeli sources exclusively that they knew months in advance it was coming. Israeli sources tell us. The Egyptian intelligence said, "Hey guys, get ready. These guys are coming." Efrigson, the woman who manned the wall for 20 years, said there's no chance that Israel didn't know it was coming. She said eyes and ears in the Gaza Strip are absolutely unimaginable, and so it's pretty clear that they knew they were coming, and they said, okay, so we're going to use this. And so the second thing is, well, if I'd asked you, 5 years ago, so Hamas drops 800 guys into Israel, how long would it take Israel to clean up that mess? And I would have said 5 minutes. The guys coming on paragliders, I would have said most of them would not make it to the ground alive. The one thing I have great respect for is Israel's ability to protect itself. And I do, there's all sorts of articles saying how they boned it. And I go, no, they didn't bone it. they don't bone this. They don't blow stuff like this. They wouldn't be alive if they blew stuff like this. Yep. And the guy who moved the concert near the border is the same guy who moved the military away from the border. I mean, and people were screaming at him saying, what are you doing? Right. But these were people who weren't on the inside of the story. And so using exclusively Israeli sources, you can show that it was, and you couldn't rampage for 8 hours. The grandmothers would take them out. Right. Now, one time I read, you don't build a wall to keep people out, you build a wall to keep them in.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they get in and they got to get back out, it's like, no, you're not getting out of here. Not in one piece. You're going out in a box, right?
It's like locking the jewelry store when someone tries to rob it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Have all the diamonds you want, but you're not going out the door. And so what appears to me is that they completely changed their strategy with October 7th as the kickoff of this big Super Bowl moment. And the strategy is to leave no room for criticism of Israel. Not a breath of light, not a hint of light getting through that seam. And they want statements that are in opposition to Israel and Jews if you want, but it's not about Jews. I mean, the Jews I know hate what they're seeing. They want it to be like the N-word, they want it to be such that you don't dare ever say anything negative. And it's kind of a winner take all strategy. So they're either going to succeed or they're going to really bomb, because I think they're generating anti-Semitism in a vast way. I don't think there's anyone who likes what they're seeing.
I agree. I think it's backfiring quite strong. At least that's my sense on social media and from people that I talk to.
Right. And the other thing you can't find, for example, is you can find prominent leaders making your skin crawl based on things they're saying. What you can't find is any sort of populist support.
Yep.
They don't have the people with them at all. You won't see people out there, protesting anti-Semitism. Except maybe some guys on payroll. You keep seeing synagogues get bombed, and I don't trust the origin of those. And I think, yeah, bomb a synagogue and then blame anti-Semitism, right? That's totally right. That's like statecraft 101, right? That isn't even a creative.
No, it's false flag. It's very easy.
A trivial false flag, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
I'm curious then. So that was a Super Bowl on the kickoff. I'm actually tying it back to the Epstein files there as well too, because I think mentioned in it we had Ehud Barak as well as Robert Maxwell, Benjamin
but they've all
Netanyahu.
been in there for so many years. Those are not news. I don't understand.
And
for
so
decades.
With the revelations that he was maybe more of a networker, do you think he was doing it at the behest of Israel, or was kind of independently but choosing to work with them?
I think it gets so blurry because the different intelligence agencies working with each other. Are you Mossad if you're a freelance contractor? Who's Eric Prinz, right? Let's say Eric Prinz, unrelated to Israel, maybe not. But so was it Blackwater? Is he U.S. intelligence, U.S. military? What is he? Well, he's a contractor, and so I'm not sure the distinction matters.
Okay, that makes
sense.
He
certainly knows Mossad, right? I mean, he was banging one of them, right? And they're still talking about giving her a pardon, right? This is a twisted bitch, right? This is a woman who really should be, put in the Tower of London, put away forever and ever. And yet somehow Trump talked about pardoning her, and I go. So as a Trump adjacent, that's what I call myself, Trump adjacent. You vote for Trump because you say the others all suck. You can be enthusiastic about Trump if you want. There was a couple of months there where I was pretty euphoric over what I thought I was seeing in the first few months of his new presidency. He has managed to disappoint me pretty badly. But I'm not convinced that I'm not just getting sucked in by press. I'm not convinced that the propaganda against Trump isn't sucking me in. But
what were the disappointments?
Well, first of all, he said there's nothing in the Epstein files, right?
Yeah.
He wants to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, so he's supporting satanic pedophiles, right? Let's start with that. Doge went nowhere.
Yep.
Best I can tell. Maybe it did,
but
he did shut down the wall, right? I mean, he did shut down the immigration, but that was trivial. I mean, it was a goddamn horde. All he had to do was put out the word and say, no, it's not going to happen. I think is the way ICE is getting rid of people is all wrong. You can't use 10 cops, 10 agents to get rid of one guy at a time. Right? I mean, that's like trying to empty the Atlantic Ocean with a teaspoon. You're never going to get to 20 million. Let's start with that.
It feels very performative. Yeah, it feels very performative to me, almost purposely to invoke division.
So if I wanted to get rid of them in earnest, what you do is you go higher up and you say to an employer, if you're hiring these guys, we're going to destroy you, right?
Yep.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Now, I'm totally okay with Mexicans coming across the border and working. I don't have any problem with that at all. They say, well, they do jobs other people won't do. And I go, well, if you didn't pay them to be unemployed for 3 generations, maybe that wouldn't be the case. But we're stuck with that now. But Mexicans, I think they worked hard. They were just sending money back to their families. It was just kind of this underground economy that was in relative balance. But when you start shipping people using NGOs from all over the world to come into this country, now I put that in the treasonous category. So I would round up the guys who made that decision and throw them in prison. I'd convict him by the highest standards of our legal system. I'm reading Jonathan Turley's latest book, something about rage in society. I just started it. It's I'll read anything Jonathan Turley writes. And it's Rage in the Republic. And he's talking about, I think the theme is going to be that the democracy leads to autocracy, leads to authoritarianism. I think he's going to say that the founding fathers knew that you couldn't just let everybody vote, that the tyranny of the majority would take over and we would vote ourselves into an awful situation. That's what Turley's going to do. I'd put him on the Supreme Court if I was king of the world. So.
No, I largely agree. It almost feels like we're approaching that point right now. Like it feels like we're in an authoritarian situation, at least a soft authoritarian kind of situation. Even going back to the original question, it's like,
not sure it's that soft.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Even going back to the idea of like the post-truth and people battling things out, it's like when the power of the state is growing more and more and more and more, and it has the ability to then enforce your will on the other half of the country, well, then of course you're going to like basically become completely tribal and fight tooth and nail to get a hold of it.
And the polls show that both parties think the other party is a threat to democracy.
Yeah, and they're all pedophile vampires, so whatever.
That's right. And so they have got us, whoever they are. I was in a Zoom group that had everyone you can imagine. I mention it a lot, but one of the first Zoom calls, that usually we have a guest speaker, and sometimes they're brought from within the group, and sometimes they're external. But we've had guys like Jerome Corsi speak several times, and he's really an interesting guy. But my first Zoom, I think one of the first ones was Bobby Kennedy and all the anti-vaxxers and stuff. But we had Tony Schaffer, who's an Army intelligence officer, and guys like that. And it's giving us kind of a bird's eye view of what's under the hood. Some of these guys Scott Atlas talked about sitting there with Fauci for 6 months in the Oval Office as Fauci completely looked like an ignorant asshole. And Birx looked like she had an IQ of about 80. She just complete incompetent according to Atlas. And so COVID's yet another story.
Yeah.
Did they blow it? If their goal was to pull off the pandemic, which I don't believe was a really serious pandemic. I think it was a serious flu. I'll give it that much.
Sure.
And make us actually believe that everything went best it could. They blew it because we think they're pathological liars at this point. Or was their goal to demoralize the shit out of us and say we're like my favorite analogy is Larry Bird saying to his opponent, I'm going to break to the right. I'm going to do a pull-up jump shot, and you can't stop me. And then do it and sink the basket. And then you have a broken defender. Then the guy says, I don't know how to stop this guy. And so did they overplay their hand in COVID, or did they play the hand the way they wanted to play it? Is that what Israel's doing? Is that what the Epstein files are? I just don't know.
What's your instincts kind of one way or the other? And even on the Israel influence on the U.S. as well, too. I can't tell necessarily like if Israel is necessarily calling the shots, or they're just very good at basically lobbying and getting a lot of money and influence.
Well, so when Israel has, one of the reasons Mossad is so good at what they do, besides the fact that they do face existential risk, right? I mean, there's no question about that. I read a couple books. I stayed out of it for years. I said, look, I'm not going near that. These are tribal wars that I tried to understand the Middle East by reading a bunch of books after 9/11, and I concluded no one understands the Middle East. No one will. It's just a mess. And but what makes the Mossad so effective is not only are they tough as nails and fighting potentially an existential battle, but they also have the slice across the world of the Jewish connection. So that if you're Jewish and some guy comes up to you and says, "We need your help for Israel," there's a decent chance you're going to give it. And so they've got this network that's unlike any other country's network. And as someone said to me, I shouldn't name him, but it's not a horrible thing. But he said, their level of commitment's not imaginable. It's unimaginable, their level of commitment. And so, that's why they're so ruthless.
Yeah.
And the ruthlessness bothers me. I got into it with Mark Levin and Ted Cruz and Victor Davis Hanson, and they piss me off. I wouldn't be so negative if they hadn't shown their color.
Yeah.
And it's a little disquieting to watch Ted Cruz stand up on stage and rip you off for supporting Hitler.
It definitely probably makes you sit back a little bit and go, how did I get here?
Well, Levin is a piece of shit.
Oh yeah.
Laura Loomer went at me, and I called her the master of clickbaiting, and then I shortened it to master baiter.
Nice.
And then pointed out that she gets paid $7,000 for every happy ending, and I said she was worthless. Cindy McCain went at me. Cindy fucking McCain, not Cindy McCain, Meghan McCain.
Meghan McCain, his daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, the web-toed inbreds of the McCain family. It was a little disquieting, and it caused me to ask the question: do I want to play in the big leagues? Do I want to step it up and sort of lock arms with Dave Smith and Tucker and these guys, or do I want to drop below the radar and stay out of this? And you can tell I'm a little ambivalent because I'm saying shit to you that I shouldn't say potentially, but I'm just still pissed off. And if you're listening to me, you're Jewish, you're a Zionist, I'm saying, read my lips. You're fucking up. You had me. Like the first day of class after October 7th, I walked into class and I said, here's what some of you know, the world just changed yesterday.
Yeah.
And I said, what I'm pretty sure is true is that there's going to be people in this classroom who are on both sides of this issue. And then I said, be careful to be kind to each other. And that hasn't worked particularly well. But that was kind of my stance on it. But, if the Zionists want to throw shitballs at me, then okay, I'll go on podcasts, and I don't know how many people listen, but I'll spew out venomous hatred of the rabid, honey badger Zionist. Forget it. You guys fucked up. You lost me.
Yeah.
I'm not sympathetic anymore. I'm sympathetic, but I think most of Israel hates Netanyahu, for example. So I'm sympathetic to them.
Yep.
They've got a shitty leader. Get a moderate leader, right? And I have Jewish friends, and I talk to him about this shit. And he says, well, one of them says, well, we're in this real brawl. And I said, Netanyahu's making it a bigger brawl.
Yep.
He could get you into World War III and get us into World War III. And that's what pisses me off, actually. So I watch a lot of John Mearsheimer and Colonel McGregor and, Judge Napolitano and Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, Anna Kasparian, Cenk Uygur. These are new feeds into my brain at this point. And fuck them. I don't know. Fuck them.
Well, at some point, if they're going after you, kind of have that instinct either like you're either going to cower down or kind of get the you want to swing back a little bit. So definitely, I can see how they lost you. And
I'm on the fence on that. Is the problem? I'm on the fence. I'm obviously throwing shitballs back at them, but I do not. My brother once said to me, he said, "Would you trade positions with Nick Fuentes?" I said, "No, not in a million years." He said, "Then be careful. Be careful." So.
It's such a hard issue to skirt too. Like even from just my perspective, I can hate all states. I've been an anarchist for quite a long time, and I can find a reason to basically hate every government that exists in this world. I have no issues with the people. They all lie. They all murder. They all deceive. They're all stealing. Right? I can be angry at the Russian government and still feel sympathy for the Russian people. I can be angry at the Ukraine government and feel sympathy for the Ukraine people. I can be angry at the Israeli government and feel sympathy for the Israeli and the Jewish people.
I'm actually ironically not angry at the Russian government.
I want to know why.
Well, I dug into it, and I think Putin tried to tell us for a dozen years that we're fucking up.
Net means yet.
Yeah, net means yet. It was an existential risk. So I'm actually kind of a Putin fan, recognizing that I'm supporting a brutal guy.
Yep.
But I think he's a very grounded leader. He's very popular in Russia, is my understanding. And he doesn't bluff. So when he says, look, here's the deal. You can't have this. You want it, I get it, but you can't have it. And the trite analogy is, if Russia tried to drop troops along the Mexican border, we would turn that country into a sheet of glass real fast. And so I concluded that Putin is not the problem. I don't think he's an expansionist at all. I think all his moves at some level are defensively tactical. And people can point to things, say, well, why did he do this? And I go, well, if you dig into it, you'll find out why. But he couldn't let NATO get a hold of Ukraine. He flat out couldn't afford it. That would be like missiles in Cuba.
Yeah.
And so I've not seen Putin do anything. I mean, I know he whacks people and stuff. I don't doubt that, but I've not seen him do anything that really troubles me.
Nothing that any other government would do. And it's funny. I'd be curious to get your take kind of on this, because I agree. I think it's largely defensive, and I think NATO is constantly encroaching on Russia, and it'd be the same thing if missiles in Cuba or in Mexico there. But the one thing that kind of stands out to me, we kind of also touched on earlier, talking about like the people that are really going hard on Zionism, promoting Israel, is the issue that I see there is, if I compare even just say Jewish faith to Christianity, and I'm kind of getting I'm going beyond my area of expertise. There's this idea of kind of,
yeah,
perfect. This idea of kind of in-group and out-group preference, right? And where I view both, I think Judaism and both Islam have a bit of an in-group preference, and then we see kind of what that can, the issues that might create, and how it can also leave like a Christian population more vulnerable to these tactics, because it's more of a universal religion, at least in my view, my limited understanding. But the reason I bring that up in the context of Russia is that I don't really get why the U.S. and Russia don't necessarily have a more favorable relationship, because it seems like there is a much, a closer relationship in terms of the underlying culture. Like you have basically a ethnically white Orthodox Christian population in Russia, and you have similarly in the US. I would think they would have more in common, even on a cultural level, than they don't. If it's just an echo from the Cold War and from the Soviet Union, or why it is that those two powers can't get along.
I think you just nailed it. I think our relationship with Russia was going to stay bad until the last of the Cold Warriors died. And you got guys like, what's his name? Deegan. I keep forgetting his name, but he was one of the most famous. I got to read a book about him. I've got it on my phone. And when we moved NATO eastward after promising not to do it, and immediately planning on doing it, so we lied our ass off. But Baker got together with whoever, like Gromyko or someone, and said, "Look, we won't move NATO east if you don't move the Warsaw Pact west." And then we broke the promise, and we made huge mistakes, in my opinion. And I think it was Cold Warriors who just could not get over the fact that the Cold War really should be over, and they were not letting it go. Victoria Nuland, or what a sack of shit, right? What a sack of shit. The Chrystia Freeland, there's just some real losers out there.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I think she's a total junkie, by the way. I think she's a total junkie.
I would not be surprised, right? She definitely in some interviews seems off.
Since a Canadian intelligence guy told me she was, so.
Okay, that's a very reasonable source too. Yeah, she got to pilfer our treasury there, give it all to Ukraine, and then go take a job in Ukraine.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah,
and that just goes going back to the initial point. Most people just completely skirt by that without even thinking twice. That Carney still won after Trudeau.
What was the name of that chick who was singing show tunes, who was supposedly put in charge? You remember the one who was singing, Sound of Music show tunes? What was her name?
Oh, geez,
I wrote about her too, but she got put in charge of some sanitized department. Department of Homeland something or other, and then you find out after the fact that she had been all over Ukraine. She was a total, boots on the ground spy for us. But it's like she wasn't just some clown. She knew what she was doing. And then they got rid of her. It wasn't working.
CoinKite has been in the game for years, creating hands down the best and most secure hardware when it comes to securing your Bitcoin. The Cold Card Q is an absolute powerhouse and my daily driver, and it's ideal for newcomers and advanced users alike. The Tap Signer gives you a low-cost, user-friendly option for those just getting started or for convenience when traveling. You can head to coinkite.com and use code BTC Sessions for discounts, or simply scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away. One company I like pointing people to when they ask about Bitcoin mining is Abundant Mines. They were founded by Bo and Christine Turner after losing over $500,000 to broken promises in the mining industry. And they built their hosting model to remove the usual headaches. With Abundant Mines, you own your machines and keep 100% of the Bitcoin you mine. There's no revenue share, no hidden skims. Pricing is simple. One flat monthly fee covers power, parts, labor, and repairs. They also guarantee uptime. If a machine goes down, their hash rate redirect system routes hash power from their fleet, so earnings don't just stop. And every machine is insured at full replacement value. Everything is hosted in the US, powered by Hydro, and mining equipment may qualify for 100% year one bonus depreciation. Learn more at abundantmines.com/sessions.
That's one of the hardest things about like today in the moment, that I've learned so much over the years that like, even like before the Epstein documents too, like even going like Pizzagate and these things, it's like, I'm pretty sure that's happening, but I don't really know that that's happening, right? It wasn't necessarily confirmed. So like part of my mind can go like, well,
Yeah,
maybe,
you bet
maybe
a paycheck, but you wouldn't want to win in court.
Yeah, exactly. And then as things continue, as we see more and more, it's getting to the point where it's like, I'm going to go insane because I don't feel like I can trust anything that I'm necessarily seeing. Even if what I'm seeing is in fact happening, I don't know the motivations. I can't tell if there's something else behind it or what's being motivated to. And even going back to that idea of like a, what's it called? Like the demotivating the population for basically disinformation. It's like, I can sit here spinning my wheels because like, I don't know, like Thomas Massey too. Like I like a lot of things that Thomas Massey is doing, but my immediate instinct is that you do not rise to a position of power unless you were already corrupt. I had that same sort of base fundamental. So it's like, okay, is this just another operation? Is he just basically playing the heel for me?
You know, you can see in things like there used to be this guy who looked like Fabio, who was in charge. He's a regulator in the precious metals market. And he kept convincing people we were about to crack down on JP Morgan and get them to stop spoofing the metals market and stuff. And then he retired and nothing had happened, you know. And I can't remember his name either. The name's not coming back to me. I was watching a YouTube, one of these things with the AI where they show the young guys and the old guys. And I realize I'm now one of the old guys, and any event, never mind.
It gets so hard to discern. I've seen the same ones with like plastic surgery, right? But you're right. It's they can demonstrate anything to us at this point that you can't believe your lying eyes anymore.
And those masks that they put on. How about those masks? God. Those lifelike masks. Whoa. So if you really want to not be recognizable on some video, you just put on one of those masks. There's no way they're going to figure out who the hell you are.
Well, even speaking to that too, I think it was it the Soviet games? I had one of my buddies recommend a book basically on the Cold War, and it was talking about like the CIA and the KGB and their involvement then with Hollywood and everything they were doing then.
What was the name of the book? What was the name of the book?
I think it was called The Soviet Games. It might have been something like that. I'll have to try and find it again. I haven't read it in a while. But we know of the relationship between like the CIA and Hollywood. And so even if I see a video that comes up, it's like, that's not Joe Biden, it's Joe Biden in a mask. It's like, that technology exists. They've been like, that's not impossible, right? And well, I'm not saying it's necessarily probable.
Weird Scenes in the Canyon. You ever heard of Weird Scenes in the Canyon?
I've not.
It's about Hollywood, Laurel Canyon, where the rock music really germinated. And so it was Frank Zappa and the Beach Boys and all these guys. And they all kind of showed up at about the same time. And it turns out the Jackson Browne, the Beach Boys, all these guys, it turns out their parents were all super deep state. We're not just talking a colonel in the military. We're talking CIA spy sort of deep state. And you're going, what the hell's going on there? And the book Weird Scenes in the Katie makes a very compelling story that Laurel Canyon was very much a CIA operation, and that they were controlling sort of the mood of the country through Timothy Leary was there, Spielberg was there, um, and that they were controlling the mood of the country by controlling the sort of the 60s rock movement in the country. And some of the musicians, when they started, didn't even know how to play the instrument. They were that bad. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I think Crosby couldn't play an instrument. And Stephen Stills actually cut all the tracks for their albums and stuff like that.
Well, they've been playing those games for a long time, right? Like it's an oldie but a goodie. But you can go back to like Operation Mockingbird, and if I'm not mistaken, I have to go and pull up the information, remember exactly how, but I'm pretty sure like the feminist movement was another CIA operation as well too, and that's been well established and documented.
Gloria Steinem, CIA. Yeah, I know. And the question is why, and I'm trying to remember that I've heard explanations. None of them are jumping out at me right now, but certainly the feminist revolution gets the kids out of the home and into the state-sponsored schools. So, and state-sponsored schools started with the Prussians because they wanted to groom the kids to be more Prussian. So
they wanted basically doers, not thinkers.
Schools. Yeah, they want a sir, yes, sir youth. And we've done that, all the whole woke thing, right? All the kids who got brought up and, you don't use fossil fuels, and, you can pick whatever gender you want and things like that. So we've turned the kids' brains to mush. And that's may not be a coincidence.
Nope. There's also the tax implications as well too, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
and even just look at the political divide. You can look at married couples versus unmarried couples, and I can probably guess more likely where you're going to be on the political divide.
Right. Well,
right?
Also the demographic plummet is big. I'm actually sort of supportive of it. You want to make the argument that we're consuming resources too quickly, then we better cut the population. I'm not really thrilled about the idea of using a vaccine to cut the population, but
yep.
I'd rather just, I've kind of pondered whether it's possible that Japan's actually in the best shape because they're the furthest along in reducing their population.
Well, I'd say, I'm going to phrase this up. One, by the way, I found the book. It was called The Moscow Rules. That was the one that I was looking for, The Moscow Rules. But with regards to like cutting the populations, like one, they kind of see them talking out of both sides of their mouth, particularly in Canada here too, where it's like, oh, we need more immigration in order to sustain the economy. It's like, no, if we need more people, I know the recipe. I can teach you guys. We can make them the old fashioned way. And then we can also deal with them in a more controlled manner in terms of we can see the population growth and we can kind of project what we need in terms of infrastructure as well. But even for going back to the environmental consumption too, that's the same reason I would argue against debt, right? Because if you're so concerned about environmental destruction and consuming resources, well, then get rid of debt, because that's just basically allowing you to consume in the future, consume now instead of in the future. On top of that, I would make the case that we really don't need to worry about population. It will find a nice equilibrium so long as we're not screwing with the money. And the obvious kind of example for me is something like home prices, right? And so if we had basically we'll just say closed society, the whole thing's boarded up, nobody in and out, it's only population growth within, that if we have a population boom, there's going to be higher demand for housing infrastructure. It's going to raise the price of housing. It's going to make things a little bit more expensive. Therefore, you're going to see people kind of cut back on having kids because it's harder to accommodate. As we kind of get that slug going through society, the boomers or that generation is finding that they can't sell their real estate to anybody because there isn't enough around. We have the decreased decline. Prices and things would correct down, and you see likely an increase then in population and people having more kids. That you need that price mechanism feedback to know how we are doing in terms of resource availability. And that population will similarly flow, will ebb and flow as needed, right? Like it's very possible that a contraction, especially with improvements in AI and productivity, could be the way to go, or maybe not at this point. But if you keep screwing with the cost of living, we won't actually be able to find out.
There's no evidence that these tech moves that we've seen increase productivity, increase growth and wealth. It turns out the guys who actually look at this using sort of the cold light of day say that even though it seems like these technological change, like Grantham, I just finished Grantham's book, and he says that the growth in the economy growth has slowed down steadily for 25 straight years now. And so you say, well, what about the internet? And they go, well, okay, but it's kind of replaced television to preoccupy us, right? It's It's you can't find the tremendous advantages of the internet in the numbers is the problem.
No, I would largely agree. And how see if I can frame this up. It'd be something along the lines of, and for me, again, being a Bitcoiner, everything's going to go back to the money, the problems with the money. But I'm thinking more about the price signal distortion. Is that you look at like the productivity gains up until like 1971, and then going off the gold standard and how it's gone since then. That we have so much. I would probably I would think that technology and the internet is covering up for even how much worse it is for basically malinvestment as a result of distorted price signals.
Well, we certainly broke the price discovery mechanism in almost every asset class in the world.
Right. Actually, I want to unpack that a little bit too. Is that where are we kind of in this I think it's the third asset bubble. I think I've heard you refer to it before. Where are we kind of in that? What signals are you looking at? And then the other one I kind of want to tease apart too is that who's going to pay the piper for the bill? Because I kind of go two ways about it, in the sense that, are we going to paper over it so that the boomers don't have their assets basically collapse into nothing, and stick the bill with the younger generations? Or are we going to actually go through and see a major correction in nominal terms and not strip mine the kids?
I so I think we're in an insanely top heavy metastable situation now. What you don't know is it going to become unbelievably insanely top heavy and then super duper unbelievably insanely top heavy? So you don't know when it's going to burst. I truly believe that we will have price discovery. I don't have a good model to explain it, but I have this almost faith that as the boomers try to pass their assets on, they will reprice.
Interesting.
And I don't have a good clear mechanism yet. I just have this funny feeling. So for example, stay within the family. No one takes their parents' house. Farmers, right? Farmers will take
Yeah.
their parents' house, right? But most people, so that they inherit it, they sell it. My kids, and this is generally true, cannot even afford the taxes on my house.
Yep.
And so if somehow, let's just keep it simple, they inherited the house, they couldn't afford to live in it. And so it's got to reprice. Things have got to reprice. And I have the markets. Most people, everyone knows the markets are nuts, right? Everyone knows they're nuts at this point. But the problem is nuts isn't a number. And so you'll hear people say, well, the valuations are insane. And I go, put a number on it for me, right? Because you can imagine a person say, well, it's 30% over historical average valuation. I go, that's not nuts. That's not insane. I have the markets at 200% over historical average valuation.
Wow.
And that means that to get back to historical average, regression to the mean, not through it, to it,
Yep.
we're talking 70% correction. Now, another way to think of it is if you just say, well, let's just grow our way out, then you say, well, let's let the GDP be 2.5% a year, the GDP growth. Let's assume that over some number of years, some number n of years, that the markets will regress to the mean. Forget about the path. You don't need to know the path. Just say it's, imagine after some number of years, the markets are sitting at the historical average valuation because we grew our way out. And the number of years required to grow your way out is 45. And so you can't grow your way out. We can't go 45 years for the markets treading water. We can actually, but they become absolutely uninvestable markets. You might be able to speculate, but you can't invest. And so so we have a huge imbalance to deal with. This is like, you've got 30,000 on your credit card. You got to do something. Something's got to break. Something's got to give. Say, well, why can't you go to 40? Yes, you can go to 40. You can go to 50. But something's got to give. There is no asset class in history of capitalism that got way overvalued that didn't eventually find its way back to cheap. You'll never be able to name one. If you try to name one, you'll likely name one that right now has not gotten back to cheap. But you won't name one historically that got up there and just stayed there, And so I think, people focus, the AI bubble story everyone talks about, I think it trivializes the problem because it's a bubble within a bubble. So it's a classic bubble. It's a big one.
Yep.
But it's within a much broader bubble that I think is just as bad as the AI bubble itself. You got the real estate, you got housing, you've got Case-Shiller PEs that are historical averages 15, it's sitting at 40. I mean, this is an unbelievable overvaluation. So we are, I believe, above what the Nikkei was. And the
Really?
Nikkei was up. Yeah, I could be wrong in that. That's the one bubble I'm not sure whether we've exceeded. But Grantham's book is really good on this topic, by the way. Grantham was a classical value investor, and he talks about, he says the markets were insanely overvalued in 2003. Think about 2003. We were at the end of the dot-com bust. He said the markets were insanely overvalued in 2003. At the end of the GFC, at the very, very bottom, where the markets had done a Red Bull swan dive from 50,000 feet, we got back to fair value, but not cheaper. We got back to historical average valuation, but not cheaper. We should have gotten cheaper. There should have been damage along the way. There should have been broken teeth, broken bones. We should have gone deep, deep cheap. And we never did. We bounced right off it like a golf ball off a cart path.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was it bottomed in like 2012 too, so it took like 4 years to get there.
Well, the bottom was in 2009.
For real estate.
Oh, the real estate. Yeah, I don't know. But the equity bottom was 2009. By 2015, the gurus, I don't mean just guys writing blogs. I'm talking Stan Druckenmiller, Howard Marks, Ray Dalio, who I don't think is actually a guru, but big players out. They were all saying we were yet again at insane valuations in 2015. And where'd we go from there? Straight up. So you say, were they wrong? Or are we that much more insanely whacked out? I think it's the latter. So I think we've got to come to Jesus moment. Now, here's the interesting story. Everyone said Trump was going to hire a wuss, right, to head the Fed. They would hire some, Trump's bitch. Someone like Lyle Brainerd would have been a logical person. I think she'd be highly malleable to do whatever she's told. And instead, they put in Kevin Warsh.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he's going to stick. That could be one of these bait and switch, like making Matt Gaetz Attorney General for 20 minutes. But Warsh has been a severe critic of the aggressive monetary policy of the Bernanke era. He's hypercritical of it. He was hypercritical of Greenspan. And so here's what I've been thinking about. The Fed chair seems to be put into place for a reason every time. So you go back to Volcker. Runaway inflation, we put in a hawk, Volcker. Reagan as president, we're at the beginning of a boom. He obviously is a free market guy, although he spent a fortune from government, but he was a free market guy, at least in theory. So who's he putting? He puts in Greenspan, who's an Ayn Rand acolyte, right? So then Greenspan's in there for a long time because we were perfectly poised for a long bull market. It had nothing to do with Reagan. It had to do with where we started and things were happening in the world. Guaranteed we're going to have a bull market. And then we replaced Greenspan with Bernanke in probably 2005 or something. And here's the funny thing. We were arguably unknowingly on the cusp of a Great Depression.
Yeah.
Now, I would say it was arguably is not the word, because I wrote about the subprime crisis in 2002. And others were screaming about it before that and after that. And so we put a guy at head of the Fed who happens to be an expert on the Great Depression right before we hit the GFC. Right? Seems a little coincidental. So then, okay, who'd we go with next? Well, Bernanke was stepping down. But I think it was clear we wanted to keep the insane monetary policy going. And so we put in a sock puppet, Janet Yellen, right? She'll do whatever she's told.
Yeah.
Then someone decided, okay, it's time to try to sober up a little bit. And so they put in Jay Powell, and he got the rates up and he quantitatively tightened a little, nowhere near as much as some of us hoped. But he appeared to have been put there to sober up the system a bit, right? Disappointing, but he wasn't awful. And now all of a sudden you're saying, okay, Trump wants a guy who's going to print, but they put in Warsh, and Trump can't be so oblivious. They didn't know Warsh. Warsh has two issues, one of which is totally theoretical. His uncle is one of the most profound Zionists on the planet.
Of course.
A guy named Lauder. Look up Lauder. And so, and there's no reason to believe that this is part of the story, except for the fact you're going, did Israel just get their guy? I don't know, right? But more importantly, this hawkishness, we're saying, okay, is it possible that the system now is, screaming, and that the guys who are advising say, okay, we have to do the reset in earnest now. So they put in a hawk. Is this the guy who's going to usher the system down to the bottom finally? And if Warsh ends up being head of the FOMC, it means that this narrative that Trump was going to pick a bitch to do his bidding is not correct. Or Warsh is a complete liar the whole way for the last 15 or 20 years. And then he's just going to be a wimp.
Yeah.
I'm voting with the he's been brought in to finally let the Jenga tower fall.
Interesting. I'm reminded of going to the bitch theory. I'm reminded of Greenspan, because again, like, his writings before and after the Fed are much better than he seemed to be his positions as head of the Fed. And
his ego got the best of him, right?
Probably.
He loved being the savior. He was intoxicated by the power.
As I assume that it probably would be.
When I first got into Bitcoin, I was overwhelmed. The jargon, the security risks, the fear that one mistake could cost everything. I remember staring at my screen and wondering, are my keys safe? Did I do this right? That experience is why I started BTC Sessions. For over a decade, this channel has helped millions of people like you learn how to use and secure Bitcoin. But I realized something. For many people, videos aren't enough. Everyone learns differently. Some need to ask questions in real time as an expert walks through their setup, their goals, and their threat model. And certain things like advanced cold storage, inheritance planning, privacy, and node or mining setups often can't be fully solved by watching another tutorial. So I built BTC Mentor. I recruited the best Bitcoin educators on the planet to work with you one-on-one. Real experts, real answers, personalized hands-on guidance tailored to your exact situation. Whether you're brand new or building a complex setup, we meet you where you're at and walk with you step by step. By the end, you don't just hope your Bitcoin is safe, you know it is. If you're ready for that level of confidence, then head to btcmentor.io and book a call with us today.
I wanted to get your take then on how much influence and control the Fed actually has at this point in time. Because for me, at least, and it could be wrong, for me, that's my thoughts as well too, that they essentially have no control over the bond market. If we go back and look at COVID, them even dropping rates to zero didn't seem to matter until the fiscal spending came in. Every time there's a problem, they say, like, we have the tools to deal with it, but they have to invent a new tool. It seems to me that it's largely market psychology, like forward guidance, and it's a little bit of theater.
Well, so this is my elevator pitch for the great bull market, the greatest bull market in history. So 1981. And if you've listened to other podcasts, you've heard it. But I presume the Venn diagram of your followers and other podcasters is not 100%. So 1981, the boomers were hitting the workforce. They brought their wives with them. So demographics was a huge tailwind. The markets were at the cheapest valuation in history in 1981 because inflation was roaring, but that's why they were so cheap. And so if you were an investor in 81, you could not possibly lose money because the bond market was returning fantastic returns at that point. The stock market was returning fantastic returns because we had wrung the system out in many ways. China was coming out of the dark ages and started selling labor for pennies on the dollar. So they were huge disinflationary tailwind that allowed us to just keep spending because they would sell a shit that you can't fathom how they made for that cheap. You had and biggie interest rates were what, about 17%, and Buffett wrote an article in '99 that said what matters is the direction of long-term rates. For the secular bear, secular bull, long-term rates, he said in 67 to 81, the GDP was fine. It grew fine. The rates were going up, and therefore we had a horrific bear market, which inflation adjusted, you lost 75% over 14 years. From 81 to essentially the present, almost the present, 5 years ago, rates were dropping monotonically from 17 to 0. And so you had this phenomenal tailwind of dropping rates, which means that which means that the fixed income market was less and less competing against the equity market for investment opportunities. And so we had this fabulous bull market that I believe had nothing to do with Reagan. I mean, Reagan might have been helpful, but whoever was president in 81 was going to be the guy who was present at the beginning of a big bull market, in my opinion. It was Reagan did some good stuff, but it's not like he triggered it. He might have even been the spark, but the fuel was not Reagan. And so then where are we at? Which of those tailwinds do we still have? And we were the reserve currency. I, for the life of me, can't understand why you need a reserve currency at this point. Your hat tells me what you think. I already know the answer. But with the advent of supercomputers and why not just have a basket of currencies, just a currency? That way you're not, they talk about the Dow getting strong and weak and strong and weak. Just take the 5 biggest currencies and just make an index and say, and I one time asked Lynn Alden, why do we need a reserve currency? She says, because you got to write contracts. And I go, well, then use the basket.
Yeah.
There's no reason that the computer can't give you an instantaneous price on something with a basket of currencies. So you're not being whipsawed because one currency is going back and forth. And when people say, oh, the dollar's strong, therefore there's no inflation, I go, are you an idiot? Do you have any understanding that a strong dollar is because it's strong relative to other stupid currencies?
Yep.
So, I think all those tailwinds push the bull market for 45 straight years. And I think the last couple of years has been just momentum, just FOMO, passive investing, you know the drill. It takes a long time. I think the markets in 07 were breaking in March-ish of 07, but it really took another year before it started to hit the conscious mind. People realized that things were happening. So I think it's taken a couple of years for the muscle memory to be dealt with. But does it feel like to you like the markets are on some precipice? Does it feel that way to you or not? Because it looks to me like the Nasdaq's laboring, looks to me the S&P's laboring. The metals are confusing the shit out of people. The difference between Bitcoin and gold is a really wild story, which I don't understand. So we could be looking at a 20 or 30 year bear market.
Yep.
That's my opinion.
I don't disagree. I also think that we're going to see basically a secular uptrend in long end treasuries, right? So
the credit cycle has turned.
Yeah, 100%. I can see basically them trying to inflate it.
What's your background, by the way, Nathan? I don't know anything about your background. Yeah. What's your background?
That was my old touring drum kit, and then that was the first drum kit I had as a kid that my kids play on.
So you're a musician?
I was I worked in university in immunology research for years, but in my youthful beauty, before I learned to smarten the fuck up, I toured around playing in punk bands and ska bands and things. And then just a couple books there too. Even it's a little bit out of shot, but I have Provoked from Scott Horton. We were talking about the relationships between U.S. and Russia on my shelf back there as well.
Speaking of guys who are not bashful about speaking out, Scott Horton. One time I was binging Scott Horton videos, so I decided to dig back and look at some from the past, and I ran into one that I had done with him I'd totally forgotten about. That's awesome. I go, oh, fuck, I forgot about that. You know what that one was caused by? It turns out I got into a brawl. I don't know for sure that they were fighting back, but I sensed they were. When the Skripal father-daughter team got poisoned in Britain by supposedly the Ruskies, I called out the Brits and said, you guys are a bunch of liars. That is not uniquely Russian technology. And they could have ignored me, except George Galloway picked up on it, and then Al Jazeera picked up on it. And so I did a couple of George Galloway interviews, and then the Porton Downs guys, which by the way were located 8 miles from where the goddamn poisoning of the Skripals were. It's kind of sounds like Wuhan, doesn't it?
A little suspicious.
It turns out they came out and said it's not uniquely Russian technology. And so it's like, I told you, it's simple organic chemistry. And so that's how I got to know Scott, because he did a podcast. He invited me in to talk about that. That's what it was.
Oh, he's wonderful on that stuff. I also be repressed to ask, speaking of organic chemistry, if I were to say, what is it, C9H9NO3, is the stuff on that compound even remotely true? Completely different side tangent.
C9H9, I bet I can guess what this is. NO3, yeah. Is that adreno?
That is the one. Is that shit real?
Well, it's a real compound.
Fair enough. It's oxidated.
It's a real oxidation product of I think adrenaline.
Adrenaline, sorry. Yeah.
I am of the mind that this whole story about Pete's and satanic cults and stuff is true. Again, the breadth, the depth, I don't know, but I think it's true. Now, here's the deal. You can buy adrenochrome. If I say that, I'm going to get you booted off.
I'm not going to monetize this one to play it safe.
Okay. You can buy it. But here's the deal. The people who would take adrenochrome thinking it's going to make them live longer, which is the idea, right? Are going to also, to the extent they believe that, I think it requires a sort of a delusional mind. I do not believe in any of that to be true. No. But they're also going to think they need the natural stuff.
Yeah.
Rather than some chemical company's product. And as you and I both know, that the way you get adrenochrome from the natural sources, you take some little kid, you torture them to the edge of death, and then they drain their blood, and you do a transfusion, right?
Yep.
There's a lovely plot line for you.
There's my intro
and I
teaser.
think people were doing it. I think people are doing it. In fact, they say, 1 million kids a year disappear globally in the big error bar. Yeah. And the question is, where do they go? 350,000 a year coming over the southern border. Where did they go, right? I don't think there's that many pervs. I think they were being harvested for adrenochrome organs. You got it. And hey, you picking up on Epstein ordering barrels of sulfuric acid for his island? You picking up that
stuff? I saw that one as well, too. It seems like he was a bit of an amateur chemist with everything going on.
Yeah, he was dissolving calcified parts of the body, I'm told. So in any event, I think there are people who believe in the adrenochrome, and therefore I think there are people who are willing to do their Count Dracula move and drain some kid's blood into their body. And in Asia, supposedly they cook dogs, which is gross to me. I have 5 dogs, so the idea of eating dog just doesn't appeal to me. Mine would make it most an hors d'oeuvre, except for the lab. You could feed a village with her. But they cook dogs in a way that they stay alive.
Oh.
So they kind of drop them in slowly. Yep. They dip them. And the claim is it makes the meat taste better. And you grind up rhino horn. There's a lot of superstitious sort of things out there. So Sandra Bullock on a talk show one day made allusion to something that sounded a little kinky. And then there was the foreskin face cream.
Yep.
Who is that? A famous movie star talked about that.
I think it was her, or was one of the other
vaginal
ones
secretions from one of them. A beer made out of vaginal secretions.
Well, that's one way to get yeast, all right.
Yeah, it sure is. And then you get shit-faced, then you get more yeast with your date.
Okay, so I'm kind of in. Okay, so we think that it's definitely something that is going on, and to your point,
I would think that at this point,
I would think that it's not a hard compound to make. I'm not really sure on the procedure to actually do so, but I would think that that's not necessarily.
I can tell you how much it costs just to buy it.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we can just buy it.
I can tell you. Want to know how much to buy it?
Let's pull it up. Let's see how much adrenochrome costs.
You keep talking, and I'll Sigma.
While you're looking that up from Sigma Ulrich, I think it is now. I
had a dinner with the founder of Aldrich Chemical Company.
Did you?
He gave me money to start my research program when I was assistant professor.
So I guess you're bought and paid for then as well too.
Yeah, and the other thing that's problematic is, and everyone thinks this is, here's my skeletons in my closet that people occasionally bring up. My son actually works at the Council on Foreign Relations. He just
Oh,
organizes the
geez.
events, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I'm pretty confident he's not a bad guy. And my wife is Ezra Cornell's third great granddaughter.
Oh, geez.
Oh, and they don't sell a Sigma Aldrich anymore. I wonder if maybe there's a reason.
They don't want that publicly searchable anymore.
Yeah.
Totally random side tangent. I used to buy a shit ton of parasitic acid from those guys. That's what I needed for work. And I got a lot of it on hand at all times. But even just jumping back to even the idea of adrenochrome and these like
Adrenochrome price
satanic.
per kilo.
Oh, good. We can buy it by the kilo. So
You
you were worried about getting older. There's no need. We've got the stuff right there.
Put it this way, you can afford it. Here it is. Here is a per milligram, it's $11. Okay, that a milligram's tiny amount. Price per 100 milligrams is $495. So it's a little expensive. It looks like a real simple molecule to make when I stare at it. I think I don't see a good reason why it would be expensive.
No, a couple carbon rings and we're off to the races.
Yeah.
But even going back to the idea of like child sacrifice rituals, like that's a very old human thing. It's a very dark part of just human nature that we've been sacrificing children for the weather gods and for God knows what for basically entire human existence.
So the thing I don't do is dig back into that old history. And one of the reasons, and I've stopped digging actively, I'm more passively collecting now. Because it's so dark. I realized I was suffocating from it. I was really suffering. But but one of the reasons not to go back is because the further back you go, the more your audience believes it to be some ancient thing.
Yeah.
And so I stay focused on the, oh, by the way, I think these guys are doing it right here, right now. As Son of Sam, for example, was David Berkowitz was in a satanic cult.
Yep.
And there were multiple shooters. It wasn't just David. And he said he was talking to his dog who'd talk back to him and stuff like that. But he then all of a sudden started acting real sane and reached out to a reporter and said, I got to tell you some shit. And it turns out there was this satanic cult that was spread all over the country and had locations in Minnesota and LA and places like that. And he described some satanic sacrifices that he shouldn't have known about if he were not part of this cult. And as Maury Terry, the author, started sort of chasing down the leads, people were dying. As soon as he got close to them, they would die. And so yeah. And the feds covered up. That's the most surreal thing about, the Finders cult, where Tallahassee cops picked up on this weird shit where they intercepted about a half a dozen kids who were reported to be in some park or something. And when they brought them in, they looked emaciated. They looked undernourished. They had bug bites. And they had no understanding of the world. They didn't know their last names. They didn't know what a telephone was. They just, everything was wrong. And then another group in DC, and they said, wait a minute, this is the same group. And they started piecing together this network. And then next thing you know, the FBI comes in, and next thing you know, the CIA comes in, and next thing you know, they wrap up the case and it's gone.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. Happens all the time.
Well, even at the start of the conversation, you mentioned we were talking about like the recent shooting in Canada. I brought up as kind of like just a representation of just how far off the truth people are at this point in time, where they just repeat the most insane things. But you mentioned MK Ultra, right? I know I don't remember if Manson was part of Satanic cult as well too, but I'm pretty sure Manson was MK Ultra, and so was Ted Kaczynski.
Kaczynski, Manson, probably. One of my friends was on Kaczynski's kill list
What?
Yeah, he was on his list of to-dos. He was on his to-do list. Guy who altered my career quite a bit with some advice. He's now dead, so there's that, as Bill Gates would say. And there are others. There's a woman who's an expert, a woman named Elizabeth Nixon, who dug into it because she found out her mother was whacked from it.
Oh.
And her mother spent time in McGill University, where CIA controlled the MK Ultra program up there in a very big way.
Yep.
And so she quit her job as head of European division of Time magazine, right? This is not a trivial thing.
Yeah.
And she studied MK Ultra. And in the middle of a podcast with a friend of mine, a guy I've known for 20 years, in the middle of the podcast, she starts talking about this. And my friend is not one to go down these rabbit holes quickly.
Yep.
He's not like me where I see a rabbit hole, I'm down it, right?
Let's go check it out.
There could be rabbits. Who knows what's down there? I'm going down that sucker. And he doesn't. But in the middle of this podcast, she starts talking about it, and he's sort of asking her about it. And then all of a sudden she starts talking about how Kamala Harris has all the traits. I think Erica Kirk, easily.
Let's just take every like sacred cow and go for all the fun ones. What's your read on that situation? Because I agree, again, like I'm going to be showed my feed is going to be basically curated to show me different things as well too. But I do find it weird. And there's something, I see this come a lot of times with, you'll see like hysterical people on the left, where my only comment is I can see it in the eyes. Like I can just see something in the eyes.
The eyes are big.
Actually, right, yes.
So there's a site called 50 Voices, where there are 50 interviews of survivors, and they talked about their experience. And when they talk, you can hear the different categories. You can hear the satanic group. You can hear the military experiments. You can hear various intelligence groups. You can hear just high-ranking pervs, and they tend to categorized neatly, and these are people explain their like Annika Lucas under pressure by Patrick Bet-David, while crying, fessed up when Patrick pushed her to admit that David Rockefeller was her owner, basically. And I was in a Zoom call with Juliet Engel and Kathy O'Brien, who are two very famous survivors. Kathy possibly the most famous. And for decades she's been talking about it. And so that part of the Zoom call was not that interesting because I knew so much about what she had said. There was nothing new. Juliet Engel, though, was more interesting. And she did a podcast with a friend of mine named J.J. Carroll, who started out as a border guard, and he started looking into the trafficking, and now he's a total New World Order type. His transformation was unbelievably quick. But she said, she didn't know she had been trafficked. She got an MD degree. And the one thing that she could not make sense of is she had zero memories of her childhood.
Yep.
She could not remember anything. And the memories are coming back. And I had long chats with Nick Bryant, who I think is the most scholarly of all the pedo hunters. And he said, their memories suck. If they don't remember something right, you can't say, oh, therefore they're lying, because they're piecing together memories from just shards. But you can be talking to someone and not realize that you're talking to one of 10 personalities in that person's head. And that personality does not even know about the existence of the other 9. And there are people walking around. You got to figure the streets of San Francisco and all these wackadoodles who are junkies. A lot of them are fractured personalities due to various experiments done to them. So Kamala, who I think she painted herself as like her mother working 2 jobs and blah, 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 blah. It turns out her mother was a professor. Her father was a neo-Marxist at Berkeley. Her mother was a professor at McGill. Hello. And she said she's got all the traits. I had been kind of bird dogging Kamala a little bit because something had bothered me. The victims, I don't know if it's generally true, but I've certainly seen a lot of them. They have flat personalities, which you can imagine if they decide to destroy you, which they do. That's how they brainwash you. They will destroy you. So your defense is to just go bland. That at some level is both what you see in Erica Kirk, but then she's also got this ability to look happy as a clam. So that's another Erica maybe. But Erica started life, best we can tell, in Romania, trafficking kids with a Romanian orphanage. They got kicked out of Romania. What do you have to do to get kicked out of Romania, right? I mean, that's quite a tall
order.
feat. And then next thing you know, she wins Miss Arizona, which I talked to a beauty pageant queen just to confirm, but it would be the same as if you handed me the drums and said, Dave, go win a concerto sort of competition, right?
Yep.
Go join a rock band. I go, it's not going to work. Well, you don't just be a hot chick, put on a bikini, and win Miss Arizona for
Yep.
2 reasons. One is your competition in Arizona is pretty stiff. There's a lot of hot chicks in Arizona.
Weather's warm. They're going to be there.
Second is these women train a lifetime to win these pageants. And so, and all of a sudden she just wins, right? Oh, what are the odds, right? And then you got this fact that she has been able to show no remorse at all about her husband's death. You know, fake crying, there's no tears. She wipes the tears off her face, there's no tears. Someone actually noticed in the memorial service that she wiped her face 8 times, all on the left side. Like, oh, so your left eyeball's tearing up, but your right eyeball's not. And so she learned to go both sides, you know, but there's still no tears. If you see someone who's like on the cusp of crying, like you're at a funeral and the family member has to give some eulogy, you can see them hanging off the precipice.
Yeah, you can see him on the edge. Yeah, you
and
see him on the
she
edge.
does not have that at all. And then she all of a sudden can just change your mood, you know, abruptly. And so, yeah, I think she looks like possibly MK Ultra, you know, Honey Trap. I think TPUSA is very sketchy. I think, you know, Charlie got into it with him over Israel, and I'm not sure who Charlie is, by the way. I've seen no direct evidence at all that Charlie was not who we think he is.
Interesting.
But his background's very vague. Try to find his kids. Where are his kids? Where are they right now? This Bible thumping woman who, you know, believes in God and her kids are nowhere in sight. If your husband got shot in the neck, assassinated, your number one job is to take care of your kids, not go shooting off fireworks and traveling the country and leaving your kids with who knows, right? You have to take care of those kids. And there are no pictures of her kids from the front. You don't see their faces. Boot up boot up Charlie Kirk's children and look at the family photos. You don't ever see their face. Then the one that was so telling, there's 2 videos that we're telling. One is they're driving up to a TPUSA function. The 3-year-old-ish daughter's in the front seat, and she's just kind of talking and chattering like a 3-year-old. And she sees the TPUSA logo, and she starts going, "Oh, Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk." And I'm going, "That's your father?
Yeah.
You're calling him Charlie Kirk?" And then the other one that's amazing is Eric and Charlie were doing a Meet the Kirk podcast. They were taking questions from the internet. And this was really disturbing. They had been married for 4 years. And the question came in, and Charlie said, "Oh, here's an easy one. What year were you guys married?" And he throws it to Erica, and Erica goes just like this. She goes, 2021? And I go, "Show me a chick who's been married 4 years, and I'll show a chick who does not hesitate in answering what year she got married."
Yep.
And Charlie jumped in and started defending her right away, you know, trying to cover it up. And Erica's going, "Well, you know, it's been really chaotic with the kids and this and that." And I'm going, no, Erica. So I think and then all the ex-boyfriends are showing up, and there's something so wrong. And I think I watch Candace Owens every chance I get. I am waiting for Candace. You know, here's the almost a nugget of memory here for me. I was supposed to have dinner with Charlie and Erica, Charlie and Candace.
Yep.
They were coming to Cornell, but then they got booted because no one wanted to hear them, that sort of thing. But I was scheduled to be in the dinner crew, and that I wish I had, because then I would have gotten a chance to read them. And at the time I wouldn't have doubted him. I thought Charlie was just a grifter. And he might have been, but you can't understand how he got from being a fairly unpopular kid in high school, doesn't go to college, gets somehow someone spots talent, which I don't see what they saw, and turns him into a rock star. So I'm still waiting for Candace to give me some hint that Charlie's not who we think they are, some slip up, and B, that Charlie doesn't have kids. Because I don't think those kids were real. I think they were props.
I'm immediately reminded of, oh Jesus, who was it? The NFL quarterback who's like with Taylor Swift, like completely fabricated. Look at the ratings; they're doing great. Fabricated relationship, which of course they would do PR stunts and things of this nature as well too. Of course, there's attempts to try and control messaging and narrative as well. And even just it goes right back like the very start of this conversation is like, how the fuck do I know what's real anymore? And I find myself doubting everything.
So if you're listening to this, though, I defy you, go search Charlie Kirk's children. And you don't have to do it, but someone listening, just put it on pause. Go search Charlie Kirk's children and find photos. And in every case like that, it'll be a family photo. And each parent will hold a kid, and the kid's looking backwards. When do you take a picture of your family with the kids looking backwards? And people defended, the defenses are, well, they don't want people to know what their kids look like. And I go, well, then don't take a family photo. Let's start with that.
Yep.
And then they're also going through airports, presumably, and stuff, and there would be photos.
People would have everyone has a camera on them at all times.
There's Charlie, right? Bam, 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 bam. And then a friend of mine used to see Charlie Kirk in the grocery store in Arizona. I got Mike Ferris, podcaster.
Yeah.
He said he saw him a lot. Always alone. No family. No family.
Yeah, that's bullshit. Because I can tell you right now too. So I've got 3. There are photos. They do exist. But especially having a young one right now that's still under a year old, my wife has me take 1 to 3 of them with me everywhere so she can have a fucking break. So there's no way you wouldn't be out of the house at some point with one of those kids. And even it's funny because even if we go to the idea of like, well, they knew they were going to blow up and we're protecting privacy of the kids. Again, I don't post stuff of my kids online on purpose, but I'm sure the photos exist. Don't look for them.
But you're not famous like Charlie.
No, but
either.
He wouldn't have always known that either. So I'm trying to remember like where in the timeline he blew up, because he started obscuring them before getting famous, knowing that it was going to go in that direction.
I don't know, but the age of the kids tells me they had the kids right away from their marriage. And where'd they meet? They met in Israel.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, there's actually several narratives, and so there's Candace actually the other day went through some series of narratives. She said, "Okay, I'm going with this one," but the story's all wrong. I mean, she doesn't have the emotion. Her eyes tell the story. I one time watched a TED Talk of a woman making the case that pedophilia was just a sexual preference. And I'm watching this. The first thing I was looking for is evidence that it was not even live. I'm thinking, is this just a setup? Are these heads, are they moved? The people in the audience, are their heads moving? Or is it just a still with her walk behind it? And then I know she had the flat personality. Boom. She had the trafficked look. There's this glaze. When you watch someone like Annika Lucas, who tells horror stories of what the brainwashing is, being tortured, being tormented. At one point they gave her a puppy and then they made her kill it. And then she complained about being hungry one day and they brought up a rotten corpse of a blonde-haired boy and made them all eat it.
Jesus.
It's a whole nother world if it's true, right? It's Aztec sacrifice time. And you watch Annika and she's just so calm.
Yep.
And it's a coping mechanism. It's just and they got nothing left. They got nothing under the hood.
So many, in my very strong opinion, so many of the evils of the world stem from like childhood abuse and neglect. Like that's like you do that and it destroys people and it results in all the shit that we see. Even the most recent shooter, the first thing I noticed, and it goes to my biases as well too, but with the recent shooting in Canada, I immediately went to try and search for the dad. Was the dad in the home? Was he even present? Right. Because kids who don't have a dad present in the home are a higher likelihood of abuse as children. And so even if we go like the MK Ultra route, again, if dad's home, dad's protecting. You're looking for the most vulnerable people. So again, we're seeing flat personalities. We're seeing tons of pharmaceuticals. We're seeing no male present in the house.
Right. They're marks, right? They're but I think some of them don't even have a family history. They don't even have a family. They're basically bred like a working dog. And so they're bred and trained, and some of them are bred some of them are born into captivity, right? It's just, and you got these nth generation satanic types, and Oprah keeps getting fingered by the pedo hunters. I call them the pedo hunters for want of a better term, saying that Oprah's a big problem. I haven't seen hard evidence. The hardest evidence against Oprah is there's a lot of photos of her with a guy named Father of God who's doing 10 life sentences for running a pedophilic satanic cult. I'm going, why were you hanging around with him, Oprah? Right? That's not. If she's hanging around with Diddy, you go, yeah, everyone knew Diddy, right?
Yeah.
She's hanging around with Bill Cosby, everyone knew Bill Cosby. But hanging around with Father of God, yeah, you got a problem now.
No, agreed. They always seem to have like the worst people around them. Again, of course, like obviously it's not indicative of guilt, but it's like, that's pretty highly suspicious. I don't have a lot of people that have been like assassinated or suicided by somebody around me. I don't have a lot of pedophiles or satanic worshipers in my life. I don't think I've ever run into one.
Well,
that I know of.
Kathy O'Brien claims that Gerald Ford was jamming it up her ass. I mean, Kathy O'Brien listed a large number of famous people, totally recognizable famous people who had had their way with her. And again, on the one hand, your brain wants to not believe it, so you say, how do you prove she did it? On the other hand, you got to be really careful. So when I was talking to Julian Engel, I was trying to ask her, do you have a mechanism to sort through your memories to try to figure out which ones are real for you and which ones are not? And she right away got pretty defensive, and I backed right off, because the one thing you do not want to do is say to a victim that you don't believe them.
Yeah.
And so they're pretty traumatized, and that, a lot of helpful suggestions from Nick Bryant on some phone calls. He, by the way, won't call someone out unless he has the goods.
Yeah.
And he named a number of famous people he thinks are seriously fucked up, who he does not name in public.
Oh, I guarantee, like I guarantee it, right? It seems like the rumors around Hollywood in particular, and again, it even ties to the CIA and the deep state that's been going on for so long. Like even in the Bitcoin space, right?
Let's just look at Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
You see that the symbol matches the island?
Oh, yeah.
That was the fun one the other day.
The boy loves it. What are you making of this beef jerky subplot that's come out of the Epstein tapes I'd never heard of before? The beef jerky?
Yeah. So that one for me, even going back to like, we know they're satanic cannibals. We have to now accept that as truth. It's clearly something that they're moving between. I'm even reminded of the foreskin cream, and would they believe that's something to do with stem cells as some sort
Had you heard of beef jerky as code word for human flesh?
Nope.
Before the files got released?
Nope, that was the first time I'd heard of it.
I'm suspicious of that story. So I watched a video of a guy who went through a whole bunch of the different emails with beef jerky references in it. And I actually had the volume off. So I literally just paused it every time a new email came up, and I just read the email. So I wasn't listening to the guy tell me what it meant. And I just read the email. And what I'll tell you is these were Jeff Epstein and his prominent friends, most of which were redacted, showing a tremendous love of beef jerky. Let's start with that.
Yep.
It doesn't, if you said, I love French food, I get it. If you say, even if you say, I love pizza, I get it. Beef jerky, right?
Yep.
Beef. They're talking about, could you bring 6 to 8 ounces of beef jerky over? And so you get this adrenochrome feeling, right? You get the feeling maybe they're eating the flesh of children to rejuvenate themselves.
Yep. The only disagreement that I potentially have, or the thing that sticks in my mind, and sorry for interrupting there, is that with pizza and the other things, the item that it was didn't refer to the act necessarily. They were coded, they were not the same. Pizza wasn't referring to food. And so the only other idea that kind of sticks in my mind,
pizza really was wacky. The pizza story was wacky as hell. Yeah.
And I wonder if jerky is code for something, but having jerky be flesh feels way too on the nose. Like, I wonder if it's referring to like some sort of drug or compound or something else. It feels way
Well,
too.
they talk about it being refrigerated, and so yeah, there's mentions of having to refrigerate it, and there's just I just don't think there are that many people who have this love of beef jerky that's so much that you're talking to a famous networker, Jeff Epstein, about beef jerky.
And needing
Right?
it
I
right
mean,
now. It's
and
definitely not jerky.
that would be like if there were a bunch of emails saying, "I just love, peanut M&Ms." I'm just, and beef jerky strikes me as a fairly acquired taste, right? There's a lot of people who say, "No, I don't. No, I can live without jerky." But I haven't seen something where the reference to the beef jerky, you go, there's no way they're talking about beef jerky. They've all possibly been actually just beef jerky. But then I saw Rogan chatting about it, saying clearly the beef jerky's weird as shit. And I'm going, okay, maybe you've seen something I haven't seen. But I've been trying to figure out the grape soda.
Yeah, that one I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what they say. I used AI to get to this one, and it made total sense. So you keep seeing reference to pizza and grape soda. So the pizza immediately red flag, right? Pizza right away, red flag. Grape soda. I do not know many adults who are still wolfing down grape soda, right? That's really that really doesn't strike me as the beverage of adults. And pizza and grape soda strikes me as an odd clashing of flavors too, right? If they said pizza and beer, I'd go, okay, I got it. Pizza, Diet Coke, but grape soda, according to Grok, which said, look, this is just what people are talking about, but I couldn't even figure out that grape was G-rape, which is gang rape. So that seemed logical, because now you can see the connection between grape and what it really is. And you go to the goddamn Podesta art collection and stuff.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my God. And if anyone's listening to this podcast and you haven't seen Tony Podesta's art collection, just search Tony Podesta art collection, and you will see some of the most hideous art you have ever seen. Satanic creatures with kids on their backs in cages, and kids tied up in their underwear, and it's just awful. It's above the fold shit too.
It reminds me of the Epstein photos of like Clinton and Bush as well too. Like almost like they're making fun of us having it in plain sight.
Right. Well, I actually think I've asked people this. I think to understand this, it helps to think of it as religion, because religions can get very extreme. As soon as you say, it's like when Matt Taibbi was studying the crisis in 0809, and someone said to him in this moment of epiphany, said, "You're treating this like a financial story. It's a crime story." And all of a sudden Matt goes, "Oh my God, you're right." So this is, if you treat it as a religion, then all of a sudden Aztec sacrifice and you start realizing, yes, that's what religions have done. So I think the Comet Pizza story is real. I think that very suspicious. The guy went and shot it up. Next thing you know, they're saying, "Oh, look how dangerous it is to talk about this. So shut up about Comet Pizza." It turns out the guy who supposedly went to Comet Pizza shot off one shot and hit the server.
It hit the server, of course.
I don't think they're talking about the guy serving the pizza. Nope. And then not too long ago, he had a shootout with the police and got killed.
Of course, right? That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, clean that problem up pretty quick. It's kind of like January 6th. Of the 60 to 80-ish cops on the beat at January 6th, 4 died of suicide.
Yeah, right.
Right. I do not need to know a lot of details to say there's something non-statistical about 4 suicides.
So you don't have to be a statistician to realize that that's a bit of an unusually high frequency, a little bit above the curve.
Yeah.
By the way,
guys who had worse days than January 6th, those cops.
Oh yeah,
that was easy compared to going in a trailer park and breaking up a domestic dispute, right?
Yep. Or chasing some guy solo at night, right? There'd be much more dangerous situations, probably worse things that you've seen.
You got it.
I just had to point out too, by the way, because I had to verify this, but I'm pretty sure I saw that with regards to the jerky, to go into where it may be leading to. The jerky was prepared by a chef who was running at a restaurant called Cannibal.
I saw that.
No. So
and that
just
makes
like
it a little bit more interesting because I would not name a restaurant Cannibals. Let's start with that.
yes.
Right? Like it's just like why not make your food sound more disgusting, right? Cannibals.
Unless it's just
And then it sounds like
it's unless it's social signaling.
Spirit cooking. Oh, so what I
Jesus,
was saying before, and I got distracted, which is common for me. I think within the religious context, I believe that part of your role as being a member of this group is to show it. So you know all the guys doing this over their eye and stuff,
Yep.
they're all showing they're a member of the club. And then there's some symbols with the hands, which I don't want to do. One boy I was talking to a guy named Eric Rice, who really knows his shit well. And I said, "What's that symbol?" He says, "No, I'm not doing it." But they're hand signals, which LeBron did one day, and there's pictures of LeBron in a dress, and I don't know if they're real or not, but if it's real, then he obviously is up to his ass in weird shit. So, yeah, so the question then becomes, and I was talking to my brother about this morning, is it possible the world's so fantastically screwed up that we just couldn't fathom it? And I'm beginning to think that's a possibility. I never would have entertained that idea, but it is an overwhelming sense that the guy is running the world. What a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, who was a former NSA analyst, an expert on radical Islam at the Pentagon, said, he says, think of it as a self-assembling oligarchy. I immediately went to a murmuration of starlings. You look at these starlings and these fantastic patterns. No one starling's organizing that. They all just somehow connect with each other and do these great patterns. And how big is it? I don't know, but I'm beginning to suspect it's way bigger than we thought.
I'm with you. Did you see the Stanley Kubrick stuff as well too?
Remind me. Clockwork Orange? I mean, that's
Clockwork Orange is one of him. There's also the theory that he was behind the moon landing, but the one that I'm specifically referring to was the last film, which was Eyes Wide Shut. It reminded me with the eye pattern as well too.
Yeah. And remember where they filmed it?
No, I actually don't know where they filmed it.
They filmed it in a castle in Europe owned by the Rothschilds.
Of course they fucking did.
Right.
Of course they did. So
supposedly he had total editorial rights. He wanted them, and he created it, and then he died, 3 weeks later?
Yes, that basically his cut never saw the day of light. They had to, now they'll say that he died and so that he finished the film for him. But the going theory is there was also a thread in that movie, a narrative. There was missing overdubs. That there was a narrative of pedophilia in that movie as well too. And at the very end of the movie, you actually see Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. There's two gentlemen that kept popping up in the background throughout the film. At the very end of the movie, you see them hand over their daughter to the two men in the background. The two men in the background take her daughter away as if they gave them to the cult. And there was reports that Kubrick was heard arguing basically with the studio over like the direction of the control, that there was this thread in the movie as well too. And then he just so happened to die shortly thereafter, and they put out a cut that was not necessarily his. They said it wasn't finished, but I've heard at least theories that not necessarily
the case. And then
of
course Tom Cruise is right up to his ass in Scientology.
Yep.
Which is way. I thought Scientology was just like, sort of, Jimmy Swaggart grift story. It's way creepier, way weirder. They're much more dangerous.
They're much more powerful. I don't know where it comes from.
The power. They actually got the IRS to back down. So here's what would happen. You try to leave Scientology. There's a documentary on it. Some famous Hollywood actors talk about having to get out of the cult.
Yep.
And they said you can't imagine. So the Scientologists would buy the house across the street, and 4 Scientologists would live in it, and their entire job description. I'm getting a call from Liam Cosgrove. You got to be kidding me. I'll call him back.
See, I can't remember where the hell we were. We're talking about Kubrick in the movies, and it led us
Right.
to
And so Eyes Wide Shut is a completely. Oh, and here's one for you. Roman Polanski,
Yep.
Sharon Tate's husband.
Yep.
She gets whacked by Charles Manson, who was,
Yep.
by the way, in Laurel Canyon. And Roman Polanski made Rosemary's Baby. And Rosemary's Baby was so creepy for me because I dropped acid and went and saw it.
That's not a good idea, sir.
It
That
was-
is a terrible idea.
I'm sitting there watching this going, holy moly, I think I'm in a satanic cult myself here, you know. Yeah. And I actually had to get up to take a whiz or something. And I was with another kid, and it was so tense. And I walked up behind him. I go, boo, in the theater. And he goes, "Wah!" like this. And the entire theater bursts out laughing. The entire theater went bananas. Yeah. I one time while on acid, a friend of mine had been arrested. And one of the guys who was straight driving, and the rest was, I was fried. I'm talking fried tripping. And we went to the cop station to visit our friend. And I'm sitting there just go, what are we doing here? And I, I'm thinking the cops must know we're high. And in retrospect, I realized, yes, they've seen a few high people go through the cop station. I was something like 14 or 15 or something. It was really,
Jesus.
Really another.
And that
world.
was the birth of your love for chemistry. Now it all makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Rosemary's Baby, that was another weird one.
Yep.
Which I think,
and
is,
of course, Roman Polanski fled to Europe.
I call it fictionalizing reality. Hollywood's job is to take something that's real and make it fictional. Born Identity is a perfect example.
Yep.
Right. So that when someone tells you about it, or you hear about it, you go, oh yeah, that's just Born Identity. So your mind immediately anchors on fiction rather than reality.
Yep.
And so on the one hand, it's showing you exactly what's happening. On the other hand, you don't take it seriously. It sterilizes it. And the Born Identity, Rosemary's Baby, Eyes Wide Shut.
Yep.
And there's a few others that really neatly fit into that idea. And the CIA has some like $500 million a year budget for Hollywood.
Yeah, I was gonna say, 100%. Like the military definitely pays for any pro propaganda and will give additional funding to Hollywood.
As does China.
And
you
the
see
CIA,
a movie with China looking favorably in it. That was China sponsored.
I'm not surprised.
Right.
They have every reason to. I was gonna say also, I remember, I forget the actress's name, but from Homeland, that TV series, was getting money from the CIA, and they were also meeting with the CIA to get direction and input, and she spilled it on like a talk show.
Oh, I think I saw that. Yeah. And she spilled she said something in the talk show that was like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. I can't remember quite well. Do you remember what she said?
It was something along the lines of like basically getting talking points and like, okay, but how should we frame this, or how are we supposed to respond to this in like the coming seasons? It was basically getting like narrative direction from the CIA, that the CIA was directly putting information to put in the show to include.
So here's the guy I'm struggling with. Okay. There's a guy who seems to be there's several CIA sources, CIA, FBI type sources. So you go way back, you get a guy like Ted Gunderson. And Ted Gunderson, I probably listened to 50 hours of Gunderson talks, and he seems legit. He was actually on the short list to run the FBI, and he's called out so many of these stories. Then you have this guy Bustamante, long curly black hair type vac. One day he went and said, "I'll answer any questions you want."
I remember him, yeah.
And he online, and I went through them all just to see, and there was some. You don't know if he's lying his ass off, because I don't think there's such a thing as an ex-CIA guy, right? He's just been reassigned. But at one point, someone asked about Area 51, and he said, that's to distract you from Area 50 and 52. And then he writes, I'm not joking. And he gave some really, really funny answers that you go, he's telling us something in that answer. The other one, though, that's got me baffled, and I don't know why I'm distrustful, because he seems legit, but there's something that doesn't make sense, and that's this Kiriakou.
I don't know that one.
John Kiriakou did jail time. Doesn't mean he's not legit CIA, because the whole Watergate thing, the Watergate burglars did jail time, and they were all part of something. So that was just an assignment. You're going to do this, then you're going to do jail time, and we'll pay you. You're one of us. Including Deep Throat was deep state, and Woodward was never a reporter. He was naval intelligence. The whole story.
Pretty sure Watergate was like his first story too. It's like, what a weird
Watergate
coincidence.
Was his first story. It's like, oh yeah, you kind of got lucky there, didn't you? They didn't exactly put you on the fashion beat that day, did they? Kiriakou, for some reason, part of it, he's got this mild-mannered quality, and something doesn't work for me, and I don't know what it is. And I feel bad, because I feel like he's trying to help me, but my brain is just not accepting it. It's not processing it as good information. It seems kind of trite.
Yep.
He doesn't ever say anything that I go, whoa.
It's like the AI uncanny valley, right? Which was very prominent. We were still getting better even at animation. That there's so much going on in like the lower parts of your brain. We have threat and predator detectors, and you'll get this. And it could be like one of these situations where you're talking to somebody. It goes back to like flat, no personality. The eyes, there's something not quite right. That your conscious mind has no idea, but your subconscious mind is telling you like this is a predator.
Be careful.
Like,
be careful.
This is not real. This is pretending to be a human. This does not line up with my model of a human in my mind.
There's another problem I'm having with AI, by the way, besides the fact that the art is soul free at this point, right?
Agreed.
AI art was cute at first, and then it got old really quickly. I must admit there are some AI videos that are still hysterical, because they're still great comedy.
Yep.
But I will read articles. I will open up an article that I think I should enjoy, and it should be interesting, and it can't hold my attention. And my suspicion is that my subconscious mind is picking up on the lack of humanity, and that it's what the AI is missing is this sense of a human touch, where the person's writing about, ostensibly a person's writing about a topic, but I'm not picking up any human in it. It doesn't hold my attention. I'm suffering. I think Zero Hedge has got way too many of those now, and it's having trouble keeping my attention. I hate to say it, because I'm a big fan of Zero Hedge, but
we look for that human connection. It helps us validate that as well too. And it's the imperfections in art and people that also give it the character and color and the things that we're looking for. I agree with you in terms of the AI articles. There's no soul there. It's too polished. It reminds me of a politician speak. Like when a politician's doing a speech, we don't believe them. We know that they're completely full of shit, because that's not how people talk.
Right. So there's this guy, Chase Hughes.
Vaguely familiar,
he's like sort of an expert on reading human behavior. He's kind of a behaviorist, and he says, if you want to know if someone's authentic, he said, just ask them, are you authentic? And he says the people who are not will say, of course, and the people who are will sit there and they'll go, yeah, I think so, because their sort of legitimate self-doubts would make them say, well, that's a deeper question. That's kind of a tough question. Whereas the non-authentic ones just say, yeah, sure. I read about sociopathy. The number one trait of a sociopath is charming. Bill Clinton. Oh my God. Class. Hillary's a poorly adapted sociopath.
Yeah.
Because
she's behind the scenes.
She's too dislikable. Bill was likable as hell, but totally lacked conscience. I think the Clintons formed an alliance. I don't think they got married per se. I met this Tony Shaffer guy, the Army intelligence guy, big swinging dick. I mean, this guy is non-trivial in Army intelligence. He got booted because he was too outspoken. And but I asked him, I said, Tony, I'm interested in the role of pedophilia and trafficking on geopolitics. Now, this subject, I wouldn't care, but I was trying to understand why political leaders were doing what they were doing. And I finally latched onto this idea that maybe this is maybe this is the gravitational force that I'm detecting, and that not able to identify in that. So I said, I'm interested in trafficking and pedophilia, its influence on geopolitics. He starts talking about Epstein. I probably should have let him go on for a while, but I kind of interrupted and said, we kind of have a beat on Epstein. I'm interested in the darker stuff. And I said, let me ask you a simple question. In some sense, I was testing because I knew the answer. I said, does the Clinton Foundation traffic children? And he said, oh, absolutely. Now, I can show you pictures of Tony with Rumsfeld and these guys. The guy's big, big, big in this world. And he said, oh, absolutely. And most people's heads would just detonate, like in the movie Scanners, right? Just boom, it would just blow up. But yeah, that's what Haiti was all about. The Clintons were always going to Haiti. It was all about trafficking. So, and that's, by the way, all the orphans in Ukraine. Where do you think they end up?
Yeah.
They get trafficked. They're worth. Ted Gunderson in '91 said a blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid will bring you $50K on the open market.
Fuck.
That's $91.
Yep.
Inflation adjusts that, right? Which means they're not going to trailer parks and being handed over to guys with vans with free candy written on the side. They're going to people of wealth and power.
Did you ever come to a conclusion of why that is, like the gravitational force between them?
Well, again, you corrupt them first, and then you give them power. So you find out who's corruptible and who's not. I think some people just flat out get told, you're either going to do this and join our club, or you're not. Like Skull and Bones, supposedly lay in a coffin and jerk off. Okay, I'll do it. That sort of thing. Sociopathy is totally non-statistically located in positions of power.
Yep.
And the reason is multifold, but one of which is that if you don't have to play by moral rules, you can excel, because things that you and I might not consider doing, they say, yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine why. For example, one of the sources of children in the satanic networks are the parents.
Yeah, that's like that part just fucking.
It's so abiological. You study biology. It just, you go, where in the evolutionary ladder did handing your kids over to a satanic cult come in, right?
Yeah.
And it may be that that's one of those odd evolutionary things where you say, by virtue of this association, you give up the first child, but then you are part of the club that protects the others, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? It could be we're going to throw one away to, right?
Yep.
There could be a group selection pressure or something on that. I was a genetics major I was a fan of evolution. So if this is the real world, there's a bunch of guys out there who all claim to have seen satanic creatures. I was on the phone with a guy who's a famous economic podcaster who shall remain nameless. I haven't listened to him in years. He's one of the early ones, way, way, way back. And the conversation just went on, and the guard drops, right? And he's talking about staring at this guys with bright red lizard eyes and shit, 9-foot zombies and stuff like that. And it was only fairly recently. At first, I thought, he's just nuts. I mean, he's just nuts. But I think he might have been trafficked. And one of the things they do is they drug the shit out of you. And I think where the satanic shit comes in is part of the brainwashing. It's part of the breaking down who you are. So there's this where the CIA, the satanic part is kind of a feeder trough for the CIA. And so they can tap into the satanics. They can maybe tap into the Scientology. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So these are like farm clubs for the CIA.
I would say it's the lower league to call them up.
Right. And but here's the funny thing is, one of the theories is that you're drugged out of your mind. They jammed you full of so much high grade acid you don't know which way's up.
Yeah.
And and they make you watch Rosemary's Baby first, and then maybe I'm in traffic. That explains a lot now. And then so what happens is there's drugs involved in religions often, right?
Yep.
Right, the
Yeah.
mescaline and stuff like that. And by the way, you want to get someone to join your religion, you whack them full of peyote, and all of a sudden the guy goes through this religious experience and says, "Holy shit, your God is greater than my God."
Yep.
Right? And so I think they might actually, sort of present satanic figures to the people who are whacked out of their minds.
We'll even go back to the mask and eyes wide shut, right? That was my immediate thought. Is like, if I'm high on acid and I walk into a room full of people in mass, I'm gonna be just losing my mind. Yeah,
that's right. And so these guys who said, "I have seen this," might not realize that yes, they did.
Yeah.
But it was part of a trafficking scheme. And then the question is, were they throwaways? Like when you there's a documentary called The Mind of a Dog, and it's about how you train dogs to be working dogs. You breed them, same as the trafficking. And then you train them, and some percentage of them just flunk out.
Yeah, they don't make the cut.
Right? Maybe some of these people are flunk outs. And then the different dogs have different personalities. So they'll take all the dogs that make it and they'll say, okay, let's give this blob of a lab to the soldier with PTSD. Let's give this really smart, such and such to the blind lady, that sort of thing. And so they pair them up with the personalities of the potential owners. And I think that's what they're doing with humans.
It's artificial selection, right? We've been practicing these farming technique and raising techniques for years. It would be naive to think that no one has ever tried to apply them to people. It's basically it's eugenics. Right. It's an old story.
What a weird world. I know so many smart, so many educated people who've gone down these rabbit holes and come out of it damaged goods, sort of like, I can't believe how many people I've had this chat with who are not shocked, who are totally on board, who've already read it all. How did we get here? I don't know.
I wonder at times if they've overplayed their hand, and I'm curious your thoughts. And we've been going for like 2 hours. I really appreciate that. We can wrap up so you can make some calls as well too.
I'll call Liam back, right?
Call Liam back. I wonder if this is sustainable. And the example that I look at is like the fall of the Soviet Union, in particular this idea of like a preference cascade. Like, how far can they push us? And if you talk to, like, I'll take a classic example. Like, did Epstein kill himself? And I think the majority of people at this point are like, no, obviously not, right? We all know that. We all know there's shit going on to different extents, but we don't necessarily speak about it publicly. And I wonder, like, I feel like it'll look like it comes all of a sudden, but basically everyone privately thinks this is all bullshit and is well aware of a lot of it. And there's some sort of event or trigger where it becomes okay to talk about it publicly. And it looks like everyone just changed their mind, but realistically, it's everyone just voicing what they already thought they were afraid to speak up before.
Yeah, there's a name for that.
Preference cascade.
Yeah, but also the common knowledge, the phrase common knowledge is used. There's the guy who made the documentaries about the Soviet Union, he called it hypernormalization. I can't remember his name because I'm 70 years old. Names don't stick anymore. And you just get so used to it where you just say, look, I don't have any delusions. They lie to us. We know they lie to us. They know we know they lie to us. So what, right? And so there certainly is a component of the story is to just get us numb. It's to just get us to the point where we say, fuck it, what's for dinner?
Yeah, learned helplessness.
Yes, learned helplessness. And I guess what the role that you and I are playing here is to try to at least... I read comments and podcasts because sometimes there's information there, like someone will say, oh, that word you were groping for, it's this, right? So you go, oh, right, I forgot. Sometimes someone will link, say, you ought to read this, you ought to read this book, that sort of thing. I did an interview with Tucker, which was quite a high watermark for me right up until
Ted Cruz
and Mark Levin started attacking me. It was fun. And Tucker and I talked about satanic cults afterwards, and he made you and I look like pikers.
Really?
Yes, really. And he said, and I know them. Because he knows these people. And I told this to a couple of my colleagues, and, they're laughing. They go, "Oh, is that when he was off his meds?" And I didn't say anything. I was a little irritated, but I didn't say anything because I'm thinking, so you think you understand the world better than Tucker Carlson does? Because I'm sitting there at breakfast with him where he's trying to sort of figure out who I am, as kind of a pregame prep. And he's getting text messages from senators. He's getting text messages from Tulsi Gabbard. He, by the way, said Tulsi was shocked by what she sees. I said, shocked relative to what she thought she knew? And he said, yes. So you got to figure she had a pretty good idea what she was walking into, and she's shocked. But we talked about satanic cults for about an hour. And his staff was sitting there, and it was pretty clear that they were not going to get out of their chairs and go do something else for that hour. I gave a talk at an investment conference on trafficking. And it was a kind of a workshop where it's breakout sessions and you get a room. And I said, how many people are going to be there? And they told me, and I said, maybe you get 20, 25. And I got like 60. And they'd set up 45 minutes to do it. We went for 3 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, what was really interesting is one of the reasons it went so far, because there were at least a half a dozen people sitting in that audience who could kick it back at me.
Yep.
In a very serious way. So the others, to the extent they might be tempted to say, well, this guy's nuts. Then all of a sudden some guy would say, well, this is the Khazarian, blah, 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 which I know very little about. I just know by name. But so it's clear that the people who were neophytes to the debate were probably sitting there astonished that there were half a dozen guys talking serious batshit crazy stuff and all speaking the same language and all talking about the same issues and all knowing what they're talking about. And
at an investment conference of all things too, right?
At an investment conference. And I told the guy who runs it, I said, well, we went for 3 hours, and he said, I can't complain. They pay to be entertained. And so it was titled correctly. They didn't have to go. It was a totally optional part. I'd given hour talks there. I serve on every fall I go to this, I serve on a panel called Boom Bust panel. And the other guys on the panel are without fail famous people. And me, and it's really funny, and I go toe to toe with them. I can hold my own against them. And at one point, Jim Bianco sitting there, and he's saying that AI is not in the bubble, and then he described it, blah blah blah. And that, at one point, I pointed to him. I said, Jim, basically what you just said, how is that not a bubble? I mean, it just so yeah, I can hold my own in that kind of. One day, I gave a talk on a mathematical flaw in the Roth IRA.
What's that?
Well,
is it the fact that it basically makes no difference?
It's actually worse than that.
Oh, okay, go on.
So I was trying to find a way to get my money out of the system in 2006 because I saw 07, 08, 09 coming. And I was thinking there's some way to hide and get it out of the system because I thought the banks were all going to go. So I started looking, is there a way to sneak money out through a Roth in some way, right? I was looking for some channel that I didn't understand. So I here it is without even using graphics. So if you turn on the TV, as Susie Ormon's telling you should open an IRA, blah, 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 some talk radio, you should open an IRA. They, without fail, say Roth IRA, right? They don't even mention the regular IRA. So here's step one of understanding the problem. If you take $1,000, the regular IRA, you put it in the IRA, still $1,000. Tenfold gain over the lifetime of your investment, just arbitrarily chosen. Let's arbitrarily assume it gets taxed on the way out the back end at 20%. You've now got $8,000, right? Now take a Roth IRA. You pay tax up front. Let's arbitrarily assume it's 20%. You've now got 800. Tenfold gain. You've got 8,000 comes out without taxation. It's 8,000. So that's the first problem. There's no mystical after-tax compounding advantage. There's none whatsoever. The only question is, which IRA do you pay more taxes on? Which one? And I arbitrarily let them be identical, and it came out identical. So now, here's what's going on. I one time invented Mr. 5% guy. 5% guy is 5 percentile. At the time, 156,000 a year, 1.1 million in assets, which includes real estate, it turns out, according to Stephen Roach. He said your number's too high because it includes real estate. But I'm going to take it 1.1 million. And if you use standard portfolio theory, when you go to retire, you can take it out you can take about 48,000 a year. That guy's fucked. He's 5 percentile earnings, 5 percentile savings, but he can only take out 48,000 in retirement. He doesn't know how to live on that, right? So I was looking at that. And then I realized, with respect to the Roth, when you pay the Roth, you're at $156,000 a year. What you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to take $1,000. So I'm going to take 155, pay taxes on it, whatever. But that 1,000, I'm going to pay taxes on it, put it in the Roth. You are in the 37th percent tax bracket.
Yeah, you're up there.
You're paying 37%, right? So now you're going to be down to like $630, and then tenfold. You know the drill. The regular IRA, you don't pay taxes. Tenfold, it's worth 10,000. You got to pay taxes. But now, what's your tax? What's the tax on that?
You're retired.
It
your
starts
income's way
at
lower.
0, but it starts at 0. So the money's spread over the tax bracket from 0 to 5, and then you go all the way up. And if you take out $156,000, just like you earned, you're at the marginal tax rate might be 37%, but the effective tax rate on the money you take out is more like 20, 22, 23. And so your tax rate will be lower by definition.
Yep.
Now, people say, well, what about if tax rates go up in this? And I go, but you don't know.
Yeah, it's an arbitrage
So
either way.
you can throw it a Hail Mary and try to guess, but for this model, if you just say, look, the rules aren't going to change, and if you want to bet the rules are going to change, okay, have a ball. That's a different debate. But the point is, now here's the nightmare scenario. I don't know if you remember this, but the Roth IRA was put into place at exactly the time that Clinton was trying to balance the budget. And what they said was, you can roll your regular IRA over to a Roth, but you only have 2 years to do it. It's one of those, buy it now, the deal's gone soon, right? It's a pitch. Now, what did that do? It generated income for the feds. You took this big wad of fucking money that you saved, and you're voluntarily paying 37% on all of it. Whereas if you had left it in the regular IRA and you took it out, it would come out at the effective tax rate spread over the tax brackets.
And hence they balance the budget. It's funny. It's like teaching compounding interest in finance in school isn't there on purpose. That most people would have just gone ahead and done that, or a lot of people would have gone ahead and done that.
Right. Well, Grantham's book, which I really enjoyed, I disagree with one part of it vehemently, but 98% I was fine with. He talks about the absurdity that we can compound GDP or earnings or whatever at the rates people assume. He does. I had done an example in which I said, imagine you're at the time of Christ, what's the value of the world? And I said, let's real estate, let's give it $1 billion, right? There's houses, there's real estate, there's the occasional structure. Let's give it $1 billion, which is probably conservative in modern dollars. And then if you compound it, if you say, what's the book value of the world now? And what compounding rate gets you there? And the answer is well under 1%. So what I realize is we create wealth at pretty much exactly the same rate that we consume it or destroy it.
Yep.
Because it would build up exponentially.
Yep,
and it does
1 to 2%.
Now, Grantham does it differently. He takes the Egyptian empire, it says, lasted 3,000 years. He said, imagine the entire wealth of the Egyptian empire. At the beginning of the empire was a cubic meter of wealth. So he just takes a volume measurement.
Yep.
It's a cubic meter, which is conservative. right? There was more. And he
They
says,
had a lot of treasure.
now he puts a higher compounding rate. He said, let's say they compound at 4.5%, which some people would think is reasonable. It's not, but some people would. 4.5%, 3,000 years. It's something like 100 solar systems.
Yeah.
And so people do not understand that that this compounding of wealth that we're observing is not a sustainable compounding. It is just this brief slice in history. And they're also lying their asses off. Let's start with that. They're lying their asses off.
I'm reminded of the, I think Jeff Booth uses this example all the time, but it's if you're folding over a piece of paper, because people just can't visualize exponential rate. I think it's 37 folds to reach the distance of the sun.
Right.
Right? But people cannot grok how that possibly happens.
Yeah, I did a podcast with Jeff. He's one of the many hodlers who've tried to convert me to the dark side.
I'll bring you over by necessity at some point in time. I won't convince you off gold or anything else.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm watching. I am one of the most hodler friendly no coiners because I'm totally sympathetic to everything you guys stand for. I see risks, and the guys I think are smart have no trouble sort of saying, yes, I agree that is a risk. I do run into hodlers who are just cluelessly euphoric. And I go, no, you're up against the state. So here's the deal. If Bitcoin really is going to take over the world, be the currency of the realm, then we are going to replace the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers with Max and Stacy. Right? And that's not going to happen. Right? It's just not. I guarantee you, they'll whack them before they get to that stage. It's not going to happen. So something's going to change. Doesn't mean they're not going to end up wealthy. Doesn't mean it's not going to work great. Doesn't mean it's not. But it's not. And the Bitcoin community was profoundly libertarian.
Yep.
And now they're all embracing the fact that Larry Fink's on their team. And I go, do you understand that Larry Fink being on your team is about the worst fucking nightmare you can imagine?
And Howard Lutnick.
Right? This is not a libertarian moment. So there's a lot of risk.
I was gonna say there's two things there. One that, and I had, I forget who was I talking to about this. It was Giacomo Zucco, because I share the sentiment in terms of like losing the cypherpunk and libertarian values. But it gave me a nice way to think about it. He was basically saying that, like, historically it would have been like you and 5 other guys, and 2 of them were cypherpunks, or 3 of them were cypherpunks, right? So as a percentage of the full group, it was a much larger representation. Now that group was ballooned up to 100, but you've got 10 guys who are cypherpunks. So we have more in number, but we're less as in terms of the overall people that are involved. And funny enough, that's been one of the things that I've reflected on regarding the Epstein files and looking that he was trying to get his hands around it. Yeah. Does he have control? No. Is he Satoshi? No. Did they try? Absolutely. And did they probably have some influence? And like, I was talking to Simon Dixon about this, which I think you'd love to chat with him as well. They've been
Simon
attacking
Dixon
Bitcoin.
has my attention. Yeah, Simon Dixon has my attention.
If you like, I would love to facilitate a conversation. He very much is of the view that Bitcoin has been under attack for a very long time to keep trying different tactics, and it makes sense. And kind of my realization to your point about, like, are the Rothschilds going to let Max and Stacy take over the world? They're not going to let them. I would make the case that it's possible that we do win, but it's not going to be easy. And my big mistake was being naive, because I thought we were kind of the Hayek sly roundabout way. I thought we were going unnoticed for a very long time. And then what I see from the Epstein documents, which again, you have people like Brock Pierce, who has allegations that he settled out of court, who comes as a child star from Hollywood, was getting involved in putting bad information and some poison pills.
We're talking about the same guy who was Alefantis' boyfriend?
I believe, I'm not sure. I'd have to double check that.
Comet Pizza, right?
No. I don't think he was in Common Pizza. He may have been, but I'm not sure. He was a child star that got into Bitcoin in around 2011, and definitely tried to push the idea that Craig Wright was Satoshi, which seems like it was another psyop there to try and dissuade, or to try and basically take shots at the network or have control over it. He vehemently tried to convince...
That's a different guy.
And so
I know this guy too, but yeah.
We've seen that they've realized it's either potential as a tool or a potential threat to their existing financial network since 2011. And they were attempting to get control over it. I don't think that they have. It's like from the decentralized nature of getting the miners, the node runners, the operators, everything, it becomes too difficult. It's like a hydra with 10,000 or 100,000 heads. But my big mistake was going, oh, no. I thought we would maybe be able to slip in under the radar, and they've gone so long going unnoticed. And like, that's not the case at all. They've been trying to at least have influence and have been actively attacking it or trying to get control over it since 2011. So to Max and Stacy taking over for the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, well, I don't think they're going to let it go easy, and we'll see how it necessarily plays out. But even from like my standpoint, I came to Bitcoin from an ANCAP position. So I was an ANCAP libertarian, like Mises, Rothbard, that whole rabbit hole beforehand. And so for me, I was very much in the gold camp. But from like a nihilistic perspective, that like gold can never win, it'll become centralized, we're all kind of screwed, so fuck it. And then Bitcoin was kind of my like, oh, we have a tool here that might kind of win. Like even for yourself, it's like I'm more interested in fellow travelers, and even like if you don't buy Bitcoin, I don't give a shit. I would hope like I'm not convincing people at any point in time. I'm just trying to get more people in my tribe identified, hanging out, grouping together, so that we can, whether it's gold bugs or libertarians or what do you say, like the autistic.
That's the term mentor.
Yeah, exactly. I more or less, I just want to get everybody on camp to deal with all the fucking horrors that we've been talking about that I think are a direct result of the existing fiat system. I don't give a shit if you want gold, silver, uranium, you want some basket or USD. Well, maybe USD actually is a bit of an issue, but I'm just for taking down whatever the fuck that monster is.
So Turley's book, which I mentioned earlier, he in the introductory paragraph said that whenever you have a major upheaval in currencies, you really have serious violence. It's not a casual transformation, so it'll get
Correct.
interesting. So what I will be watching, I don't have any intention of buying Bitcoin to get wealthy, right? I'm and people say, well, you can transport it anywhere, if you have to leave the country. And I go, I'm not leaving the fucking country.
Yeah,
I'm cool. Shit.
Nice
right?
house, 5 dogs.
It makes sense for some people. I was talking to Grant Williams, and he was sitting there with a bunch of hedge fund guys one day, like 8 of them at a table. And he said, every single one of them has a bug out plan. I go, well, what's a bug out plan? How do they describe it? He said, get on the phone, make a call, drive to the airport, fly offshore, period. Everything gets triggered by one phone call. The whole thing gets rolling with one phone call. He said that spooked him. There's a guy named Rainwater who was big early proponent of bug out plans. But so what Bitcoin has never been through, and I will be watching at least with fantastic fascination, is Bitcoin has never been through a banking crisis.
Yep.
Bitcoin, and when I say that to hodlers, the green ones say, oh, we've been through our, and I go, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a global liquidity crisis. I am talking about a big deflationary, squashy like a bug crisis. And how Bitcoin responds to that will be, in the very least, fascinating.
No, I completely agree.
Now, what I've been watching, and I've been talking with Marty, and I don't even have to say Marty's last name. That's how
I know exactly who you're talking about.
I know Marty. That's like saying I was jamming with Prince the other day. And it is how they come off the battlefield after that will be really interesting. And I think I will be watching it from the cheap seats, right? From up in the stands, out of the splash zone, I guess. I could imagine owning Bitcoin at some point. I was going to. Bitcoin, when I wrote my annual write-up this year, Bitcoin was rolling along pretty well. And I made passing reference to the fact that I was going to buy some hodler repellent, which was buy a small amount of Bitcoin so I could say, okay, I own it now. Would you please shut the fuck up?
Yes. I would say, if you want, because the other thing I do is actually like train people on how to use it. I will happily send you the gear and set you up. And you don't even have to buy any. But then if you ever want to, you're already ready to hold it.
That generous offer has been made by every hodler on the planet. Just so you know,
I'm going to keep
Marty's agreed to set it up right there in the middle of our podcast, so I know who to turn to when I need the help. And then I think the great risk is that you guys just get, and you might do well en route. So let's say all of a sudden we go to a gold center and they say, we're going to confiscate your gold. They'll probably pay me good money for it. Right.
Yeah,
so the good news would be that if your Bitcoin, if what you've accrued is worth something before they squish you like a bug.
Yeah.
The bad news is if they just crush you. But I think that's less likely. I think you're more likely to have benefited from being an earlier entrant. And then at some point, I think it'll be absorbed into a digital world that that you become. And people say, well, they can't stop us. I go, look, if they say Bitcoin's illegal, it's game over.
Yeah, it's basically
That means you
you're
can
right in
buy
the same way.
drugs and Epstein's pervs, but you can't go to the grocery store. You can't, right? So if they decide to go at Bitcoin in a truly authoritarian way, but I think they're more likely to just find some way to swallow it into CBDC.
I think they
And I
already
know that,
are, right? The
well,
ETFs, the treasury companies, I think they're just trying to get it basically in your Klaus Schwab trading account and try to
that's
squash it as a
right.
currency.
And again, I'm not rooting against Bitcoin. And one of the things I've gone way out of my way, because this year has not been your biggest friend,
Yeah.
to not in any way catcall the hodler community, because if gold went down, I wouldn't want to hear from you guys either. Let's
Yep.
start with that. But it in no way does this year being a bad year mean you're in any way wrong or right. It's just noise. It's just white
Yep.
noise. And so what I was talking to Marty about is the question of why are Bitcoin and gold uncorrelated?
Yeah, that split happened like 6 months
Why do
ago
you
or so.
think that is? Because Bitcoin took a dive and gold just kept going, and I'm trying to figure out, because they seem like they're the same trade at some level.
It's both. So for me, from my perspective, what I'm seeing is there's still a huge asymmetrical, it's like information asymmetry, right? So, and I've seen repeated FUD over the last year to the point where I don't think it's accidental. I think someone is trying to push down the narrative, trying to create, like, basically get any speculators, people who don't understand what they're holding, to get out. We had the quantum FUD, Tether was back on the table. It seems like I don't think necessarily even the proposed fork and the kind of spam wars battle within Bitcoin feels very much like divide and conquer to me. Like, you have people that are on the same team, just at each other's
like
throats.
fighting ICE agents on the street, right?
Exactly. So there feels like there's been a big disinformation campaign to basically push down from a narrative perspective, and it seems very effective. Why? I have no idea what the motivation is. I just can see this kind of pattern playing out. I don't know if it's to fill their own bags, because they just like Tom Luongo was chatting with him last week, puts it in that basically a threat to the payments network, that pays people that are involved in the payments processing that have the issue, that want control over those rails. But I think it's largely come from, it's easy. Gold has the history and has the large group, and it's an easy to understand. But if someone tells me, like, oh, I heard Jeffrey Epstein controls Bitcoin, it takes me a while to actually run through why the fuck he doesn't, like how a decentralized network works. There's quite a lot that's like from Matt and Odell, it's stay humble, stack sats. There takes a lot of humility to actually go, like, okay, understanding this and all the game theory at play, it takes a while. It's not necessarily difficult. There's just a lot to chew through and a lot to think on. And most people, like we were talking, are basically distracted by the bullshit in their lives. They both have to work. There's shootings going on. Everything fucking sucks. They don't have the time to die. They're not weird monetary obsessed people like me who have to be right about things. So I keep reading stupid shit so that I can argue with people in bars why communism is a terrible idea. And they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So I think it's largely just information asymmetry and sentiment. It still trades like, I think if you take the S&P 500 equal weighting, it just trades like a stock. Like, it's just still being traded like a tech stock, like a speculation. And I don't know when the moment that actually gets grouped in more with the safe haven assets, more with like gold or treasury, something along those lines happens. I think that's where it belongs, but it's not there yet. And it's not traded like that yet. And in terms of things that I'm watching that are really important to me, so you're right, we haven't seen like a banking crisis, like a real liquidity crunch. And my guess is it nukes to zero, like basically everything else. Not zero, sorry. It nukes down correlation to 1 and bounces back really fucking hard, kind of like what we saw during COVID. But the thing that I'm paying closest attention to, because it's also near and dear to my heart, is if you go back, man, I could go on this rant forever. If you go back to the trucker protests, they tried to send $12 million through GoFundMe. That was stopped and seized and never made it there. They tried to send through GiveSendGo $13.1 million, if I'm not mistaken. It basically made it into the Canadian banking system and then was seized once it crossed over into the border. The only digital payments that made it to the truckers was Bitcoin. There's, I think, 1.2 million that was raised. And Ben, who's the like host of the channel, the other guy that I work with, that was his node and his setup. He thought he'd get like $5,000. They ended up getting 1.2 million, and most of it made it to the truckers, not all of it. But they learned a lot of lessons from
What
that.
happened to the people who were looking at prison time, the Coots 4 and things like Coots?
So like Tamara Lynch, Tamara
Lynch, yeah.
She was sent. Her and Matt were both sentenced to probation. So they were convicted, and they're not serving jail time. They're serving probation right now.
But they got the shit kicked out of themselves just having to fight the fight.
Oh, absolutely, right. And there are people that in the Bitcoin space that have left the country and even left during that time to get the fuck out because it got really heated, which is why the thing that I'm curious to see how it plays out now is the Alberta independence movement. And the reason being is that if they'd crack down on bank accounts for bouncy castles and street hockey and honking in Ottawa, I think this thing actually does have a lot of momentum. Even if it gets to being a referendum question, I foresee the same financial crackdown coming back up again. So I'm really curious to see Bitcoin in that environment, not from the price appreciation or even like liquidity, but like, can you exist outside the banking system if they try to crack down on you again?
Right. Look at the price of gold just for fun right now.
Oh, geez,
Put it
okay, I
up
gotta
on your
fall.
screen.
Is it
It's
cheap or
entertaining.
expensive?
No, it's as soon as you see it, you'll see why I'm making you do it.
Oh, what the fuck was that?
It got a monkey hammered. That's a professional wrestling move. For those who can't see it, gold just got hammered for about 4% in about 15 seconds.
Hang on, I gotta pull it up. I share screen.
Yeah, pull it up. I just happened to look and and it's like, oh dearie.
Because I was going to ask you if gold was cheap right now at one point in the conversation.
Well,
see, that to me,
it's cheaper than when we started talking.
What were we sitting at there? Because it was basically just trading horizontally at, what is that, like just over 5,000? No, it's 5. My eyesight sucks. 564.
So I got to get on Twitter and ask someone what happened to gold, because someone will know. Someone will say, oh yeah, Powell came out and said X or Y or whatever.
That's the other thing about these markets. Like, a lot of these moves look completely just like momentum trading going out of whack, bots going crazy, and just like randomly, like the Bitcoin market has not looked like, it sounds so stupid, like natural to me. Like that move in gold looks like, what the fuck is that bullshit? It's gold. It's like, what? How many $1 trillion market cap?
That's right at the close of the U.S. market. So someone had to close out a position. And presumably, it's Thursday. It might be options expiration
Options
day.
expiry? Yeah.
I think we're a week early. I don't pay attention. I don't care about short-term stuff.
Yeah.
So, I was buying gold in a closed-end fund in 99 at 270 an ounce, but it was 28% below NAV. So it's around 220 an ounce. So, moves like this are kind of within the error bar of who cares for me. I'd rather do that going up, not down. I mean, I do care about that.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that silver did the same thing, but if it didn't, then what it tells me is that, no, see, silver did not do that. Silver did it, but it did it about 45 minutes earlier. SLV, just look at SLV.
Interesting. Yeah.
So silver led it, but it was not as steep. So this is probably some highly correlated movements going on in the market. What's troubling, what should bother people? So in 99, 2000, I could be remembering dates wrong, but my old fraternity brother, who I was really tight with, founded Goldman Software Group. He founded their software group. Talk about ground level.
Yeah.
The guy's name is Rick Sherlin. And he, I think it was in 2000, made a tough call on Microsoft. And Microsoft dumped, and the market dumped something like 500 points on his Microsoft call.
Oh.
And then by the end of the day, they had gotten back to even. And I said, these markets are broken now.
Yeah.
These markets are broken. So the way I like to describe it is the markets are acting like a teenager driving on black ice.
Yeah.
And so it appears to me as that we're going to lose it on a curve somewhere along the way. And then we're going to get a cascading failure.
Well, 10% on silver in a day, like after we just had that massive drop, feels like
I didn't even notice the magnitude of silver. Silver is 11%. Yeah. So silver wasn't a drop, but it's a deep dump. That's it. That's extraordinary. Silver, I was buying silver eagles for $4 a piece. I mean,
fucking Tom Luongo told me the same damn thing. I'm like, you son of a bitch. He's like, they're buying it at 85. What the fuck do I care?
Well, so one time I was crossing at Chris Martin said, and we were laughing because he says, yeah, I have people say to me, well, it was easy to buy gold back then because it was so cheap. And we laugh. I go, it was easy. It was so cheap because there were about 5 of us who wanted the shit.
Yeah.
I mean, no one, you couldn't give it away. You couldn't find anyone who, one time a friend of mine, he sold a small startup. He was a VP of a startup, and he made a ton of fucking money. He sold it to Mettler. And it was right at 2000, right at the rollover. And I said, Alan, I said, do not dump this money into the market. Do not just shove this. You're going to get crushed. And he said his partner, who was the CEO of the company who sold, he said, yeah, he wants to buy Cisco and this and that. I said, don't dump it in the market. So about a year and a half later, the dot-com bust had come.
Mm-hmm.
And he sits and he says, you called it. He says, you called it to a T. How did you know? And I said, because this has played out many times. The script has already been written. And then he tries to get me to get me to tell him what I'm doing. And I finally said, well, I bought a bunch of gold.
Yeah.
And he goes, gold?
Right.
And I go, yeah, gold. I said it doesn't seem like the logical thing to do, but I know some smart guys who also agree, And I remember I was on a podcast with the Cornell Economics Report. I don't know how they found me because I wasn't even doing podcasts at that point. I really was not. I don't know how they located me, but Gordon Brown had been dumping British gold into the system to keep the price down, best we can tell.
Yeah, Brown's bottom.
And I was on this podcast, and I said to Corlin, I said, something has changed in the gold market. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, so the price of gold started to get some legs, and Gordon Brown announced that they were going to sell more gold. And instead of driving the price down, the price went up. And then just a few weeks ago, he sold the gold, and instead of driving the price down, the price went up. There's something different. And that was really the bottom right there. That was the brown bottom, as I like to call it. And I said, it's not behaving the same. I called the platinum. I'm not a trader. I don't have any trader genes in me because the timescales are just dead wrong for me. So I averaged in the gold over 4 years.
Yeah.
But I realized in the modern market, you get a good idea. It's not going to wait 4 years.
No, you got to go quick.
So I've been watching platinum for several years, and it flatlined, flat as a pancake. And in May, and I've got tweets showing what would make this market move. I don't understand. And I started asking technical guys, what price would get you to get serious about this chart? So he goes, platinum had been flatlined. I mean, like you could land an airplane on it for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, I think it was May, PPLT. PPLT is the thing, PPLT.
I say, look at platinum. It dumps 6% as well.
Yeah, what a shock. Go to PPLT and expand it to 10 years.
Okay, let me find PPLT.
Jesus. My portfolio is going to be gruesome today. Go to about 10-year mark. Go the 10-year mark on platinum.
Okay, let me find it here. 10-year here. I'll pull on that one. And let's go to the 10-year. Oh,
so
God.
I figured it was being pegged to hurt the Russians or something because they were selling about 15% of the platinum in the world. And I'm watching, and you get and then finally, all of a sudden, it finally just started to lift up just a little bit, right about there. It picked up. And
March of 25.
It not only started to pick up. So if you move your cursor a little to the right, I picked right about halfway up that first slope. I said,
yeah,
it's moving, and the volume went up about 5-fold. So it's a high volume upward swing. And so I started hitting the buy button. And over the course of that ramp, I bought platinum probably 10 times. Now, I don't buy big slugs. I buy peaks because I don't like the gambler's ruin philosophy of buying dips. If you're buying dips, psychologically, you're trading like a crack whore at that point. And I think it's psychologically bad to buy dips, unless you really know what you're doing. And it worked out really well. And the platinum story is different than the gold and the silver story. The reason it's different is because, and I've tried to shoot down this model. I haven't been able to shoot it down. I've thrown it at a couple of big guns. They said, you appear to be dead right. Platinum has been in deficit production for about 4 years.
Oh.
It's used in catalytic converters.
Yep.
There's a few. It's actually being used for jewelry now that gold's so expensive.
We need it for surgical implants too, don't we?
Maybe. I don't think that's
reactive
probably
with the body.
It's probably not a big part of it. Probably not a big consumption part.
Yeah.
it's mined primarily in South Africa, which is potentially a failed state. So if South Africa fails, the miners are going to get killed because the Marxists will grab them, but the price of the platinum will soar.
Yep.
And 15% from Russia, we haven't exactly been licking their ass. And so it turns out that according to current deficit production and current above ground supplies, which, well, as of yesterday, were probably worth about $7 billion.
That's not much at all.
That's not much at all. We are going to run out of platinum in less than 3 years. At the deficit production and the above ground supply. Now, they'll find supply.
Of course.
But that is about as bullish a case for a metal as you can make. If you look at silver, the same analysis gets you to about 25 or 30 or 40 years or something. There's a ton of silver that we can consume before we actually run out of silver. Now, they will produce more, but you're not going to not produce a Ford F-150 because the platinum costs too much. You're just going to add it into the price. You're going to be really insensitive to the price.
No, 100%. Was there any reference in the strategic minerals reserve that Trump was talking about to platinum?
I don't know. Silver was put in there.
Silver was, yep.
So what do you think happened today? Then something put a beating on it. Well, here's what's interesting. The NASDAQ got a bit of a beating put on it too, but it was much earlier in the day. So they're not correlating. It's not like Powell stood up at a podium and said something.
Yeah.
The VIX shot up. Of course, that correlates with the NASDAQ. The VIX started shooting up around 10:30, peaked at about 11:30. So these markets are not efficient. They're not correlating, by the second.
Yeah.
But something important happened. I'm going to have to get on Twitter and find out what the hell happened.
I was just looking at Dollar Dentata Kremlin memo explores rejoining U.S.-led financial system. I'm just checking out Zero Hedge to see that anything. All foreign roads led to Milton Keys. AOC.
Zero Hedge is not covered at all. This is interesting.
Right?
Zero Hedge has no coverage of the Epstein files.
Oh, of course.
Right. I find that creepy because they're usually pretty good on stuff like that.
They are. There's this one place in the world that people just don't want to talk about.
There is. Little postage stamp size place.
Right? Which makes me want to talk about it all the time. Yeah, I'm seeing nothing even from Zero Hedge. I see nothing on Twitter right now.
I'm gonna have to ask some people, say what happened today. What's the narrative that it could be? You hear about like gamma squeezes. Do you know what a gamma squeeze is? Because I sure don't.
No, not really. It's something to do with like short positions and leverage on derivatives, but I don't fucking get what's going on. I just know it means it moves violently.
I think of gammas as synonymous with your testicles. you get your gamma squeezed, like that French ski racer. Did you see that video?
I heard about this, that we have some sort of like testicular manipulation in order to go faster for the Olympics.
No, what he did is he caught one of the gates in his crotch.
Oh,
on a downhill. It was either giant slalom or downhill. And it got an audio, and you can hear him whimpering. You can hear him, and then he seems to reach down his pants and look at his glove like he's looking for blood, right? I mean, serious. And the narrator is having a field day. And he's going, boy, he sure got those boys that time. Stuff like that. You got to find it. It's just search French skier, and you will find this video, and it just rips his nuts. But the best part is the commentary by the sportscaster, in which he just cannot resist making jokes about the guy getting neutered by catching the gate. It didn't even look like that big a catch to me, but the sound effects from this skier were pretty spectacular. You could tell the guy was really not a happy camper.
Well, I'm glad. Well, I think that's the perfect place to put a pin. It is a nice happy ending. Go check out a video, classic humor of a guy getting hit in the nuts. Professor Collum, where can everybody go to check out your stuff, to follow you, all that fun stuff?
Well, you can find me at the bottom of the metals market. This is my portfolio. Let me just finish with what it's telling me right now.
Yeah, how bad was today for you?
That's not too bad, actually. I'm sitting at negative 4%.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No, it isn't, because with gold, part of it's because the drop in gold's about 3.5%.
Yep.
So, and my gold position is so big compared to everything that it kind of owns whatever gold does. It does. My worst is silver. It's sitting at 11.
Silver at 11%.
-11. I've got one green position.
What is it?
Two green positions. They're both tobacco stocks. And I think that's the guys at JP Morgan say, okay, guys, let's light them up.
Yeah.
Hey, you. Yes, you watching the Bitcoin price movements and the latest exciting news. It's awesome to stay informed, but the real power of Bitcoin comes from taking control. Don't just watch, take action. Head over to btcsessions.ca/learn for free step-by-step tutorials that guide you through every major skill you need to know, plus full video playlists for deeper dives on any topic you like. And if you're ready for the ultimate fast track, scroll to the bottom and check out bitcoinmentor.io for premium one-on-one experience with my team of Bitcoin experts to ensure you get it right the first time. Don't wait. Secure your Bitcoin future today. Hit the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen.
If you enjoyed this episode with Professor Dave Collum, please do like and subscribe. It really does help us out. And check out the previous episode with Tom Luongo.